Well, good morning. Can y'all hear me? It's on. It's on. Keep saying, hold on a minute.
I hear you online.
Justin is the man. I want to thank Justin personally and right off the bat. He has been at every meeting that we've had. He has been all over the state. Sometimes he leaves at 5 or 6 in the morning to get where he is. I think he did come down yesterday to get a little head start. But thank you for everything you've done for this committee and for the service you have for the state and all of our different committees. I just want to thank you personally. The IT, the communications guy. So thank you, Justin. Um, so welcome to our fourth meeting. Fourth meeting is probably going to be our final meeting of this licensing committee, looking at the licensing issues and the licensing division of the Secretary of State's office. Um, we're glad we have a crowd, and we never know what kind of crowd we're going to get. But those of you that want to speak, um, we do have a sign-up sheet over here over on that table. If you want to speak later on, we'll have a time for public comment. Now, on behalf of the House members here, well, we welcome you, and I'll turn it over to Co-Chairman Tillery.
Well, thank you, Chairman Hatchett. Again, echoing what you said about Justin and a few other people that I know we need to thank, particularly Georgia Southern University. Appreciate you, President Marrero and Anna Lee Ashley, Lanita Holsey, Joey Reeves, Jeremiah Womble, and those others who've helped us be here and get this set of today. House Media Services, y'all been great this entire time. Know there's some other folks that we've got that have been participating through NCSL. Annie Miller and her colleagues, Zach Barnes and Susanna Holton. Thank y'all for your help. And Ronnie Hines, who's been willing to present this morning and travel from Colorado to do so. So we appreciate all that. On a personal note, I need to say thank you to my colleagues. As you know, my area particularly has been destroyed by the recent storms that came through Hurricane Helene. And some of the first people to respond were my colleagues up here, the senators and the House members. House members loaded up no short of 4 or 5 tractor trailers of generators, tarps, goods, water. So much water that honestly we don't need any more water. Thank you. And the folks that responded, while the response was coming from around the state, I'll have to say that the ones who responded the fastest were the colleagues that we have in the General Assembly. And I really want to tell you thank you on a personal note that our family didn't have power for 9 days, and that's okay. Some people still don't have power. But about day 2 or 3 with a 5-month-old and a 3-year-old is pretty difficult. And my family actually evacuated to Chairman Hatchett's house, who did have power about 45 minutes away, so that I could keep doing what I needed to do in the district, running chainsaws and doing things. So Chairman Hatchett, while we do pretend to be friends up here, I think it's important for other folks to know that that friendship is deeper than just what you might see on a television screen or in the General Assembly. The people of Georgia, while this has showed us the worst of Mother Nature, we've seen the best of the people of Georgia, and I really appreciate all of you and your help. Last comment about this meeting specifically is in this meeting here, first time we've had this, there's a really large television in front of me and Chairman Hatchett, so we can see what y'all have to look at all day. And I just want to apologize.
So let me apologize too on my behalf.
And really, really thankful for our colleagues that are joining us down today from the Senate. Chairman Larry Walker from Houston County, who has a large district that also was affected by the storm, and also Chairman Billy Hickman, who chairs the Education Committee, Higher Ed Committee, and his home hearings in Statesboro. We look forward to learning more from you today and hopefully sharing with you just a little bit about what we may be doing later on. So kick it off back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Tilley. Thank you for those kind words directed at me very much. It was a pleasure to entertain your 3-year-old and your 5-month-old. And I learned hopefully what it's going to be like to be a grandfather. So my wife loved it. It was fun. It was nice to have them. And I'm pleased that we were able to offer a little help. So I did not introduce my colleagues. The one sitting right next to me is Representative Lehman Franklin, who represents this area. The other guy that's sitting up here, I'm going to introduce him in just a second. Chairman Brian Prince is here. I just saw him walk in, so he'll be joining us in a minute. But First off, I'd like to introduce Speaker of the House, John Burns, to say a few words. We're in his territory too, and he's one of the reasons we're all here. He and the Lieutenant Governor assigned these duties to us, and it's been my pleasure to try to help with those issues that we all have been hearing so much about. And with no further ado, Speaker of the House, John Burns.
Well, good morning. It's always a great day to be a Georgian, but it's a great day to be at Georgia Southern, certainly in Southeast Georgia. Chairman. I think we lost. Thanks. Come on, Brian. We're back. Got it now. Just a note, I understand a lot about technology. I can move that, Brian. We good? I am really good at technology, Justin, so thanks for helping me with it. You know, you have to do that all the time. So welcome to everyone who's not from our neighborhood down here in Southeast Georgia. It's welcome to our part of the state. I want to just echo what Chairman Tillery said about the response to really to Hurricane Helene, and really the tragedy that's the sadness, if you will, for me, when we see the generational damage to our neighborhoods and to our cities and our counties around East Georgia and South Georgia. It's really heartbreaking. But what I tell you what it has done, Blake, it's restored my confidence in mankind. And sometimes that in this day and time with what we hear and see, that is sometimes diminished. But I tell you, what our neighbors have reached out from not just this state, from around the country to help. That was the important part, Justin. They're back on now. Thanks, Justin. To help their neighbors is really heartwarming, and a lot of people are receiving a blessing. So it's most appreciated. I want to thank the members of this committee, from the delegation that represents Bullock County and Georgia Southern. Chairman Billy Hickman, thank you for your attention to detail when it comes to so many different things, from literacy to the well-being of our area. Thank you for that. You're my senator over in Effingham, where I live, so we appreciate you. Chairman Butch Parrish is with some healthcare professionals today, as he should be, because he is certainly the driving force behind healthcare in the House. But Butch also represents Bullock County as well in Georgia Southern. Lehman Franklin, we appreciate your insight into all things Bullock and all things your work for the state. So thank you for allowing us to be in your district. And we appreciate you and all that you do. My other colleagues, Chairman Brian Prince from Augusta, we know that Augusta and Richmond County and Columbia County and your district on down into Rennes. I think you represent Rennes and Wadley, Jefferson County. So we know you've been hit hard as well. So thanks for what you've been doing to provide resources for your people. And thanks for being here. To our Senate members, Tillery and Walker, Larry and Blake, thank y'all for y'all's persistence on continuing to pursue the good work of what this committee has done, gaining the facts and looking forward to the recommendations that y'all are going to bring to us we can consider doing the session. So thanks again for y'all's time and effort. Chairman Hatchett, what can I say? You're a great man. Matt Hatchett has done great work. He's about all things Georgia and helping Georgians. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you as a friend and as a colleague, but especially what you've done and are doing for Georgians. Thank you. And working very closely with Chairman Tillery. before I introduce the president, I'll have one remembrance. And that's someone who would have been here. And that's Senator Jack Hill, who loved this place. He loved Georgia. And Blake, you've done a good job filling in the shoes of Senator Hill. I know he's proud of you as well. So just always, I like to remember Jack, because y'all know that story seldom told is soon forgotten. So we won't forget Jack Hill and his contribution to our great state. We're a pretty cool place, y'all. We're proud in Southeast Georgia and all over Georgia as they educate Georgians and international students right here at Georgia Southern. What a great institution, and the great leadership that's provided by Anna Lee and Brian and the president, as we look at expanding their footprint in Georgia when it comes to not just engineering and education, but also now to the medical field. So what a dental school, medical school. Hey, doing some great stuff, Mr. President. And you got a pretty good football team this year too. We're proud of that as well. So we always throw that in. And so you're going to have an announcement too. I hope you'll tell them about that and welcome them down here when we do a ribbon cutting, I guess, in the near future. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce a man that really needs no introductions to y'all here, but is the president of Georgia Southern College, Georgia Southern University. I did graduate from Georgia Southern University. The 14th president of Georgia Southern, Kyle Marrero. Mr. President, thanks for being with us. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for letting me introduce him, because he is a dear friend and doing a great job here at Georgia Southern. Mr. President.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, Chairman Hatchett, Chairman Tillery. Thank you all for being here today on this important subject. We're just delighted and privileged to host you here, and you're always welcome to Georgia Southern. For us, particularly as you talked about Hurricane Helene, I just want to spend a moment there because my colleagues in Valdosta, Richard Carvajal, the president there, and of course, Russell Keene and Augusta that are still recovering. East Georgia State College also saw significant damage. We had about 80 trees down. We took us about 36 hours till we got power back, but we immediately turned then to help our community. And that's what a university does, particularly a university of 27,500 students, 3,000 employees that then has a $1.1 billion annual economic impact to the region, is how can we then help our neighbors, our Eagle Nation colleagues within this region. And for us, what did that mean? That meant housing 500 Georgia Power linemen in our facilities. That meant housing 70 East Georgia State College students in our residence halls for a week and a half until they could move back. It also meant for us opening up our dining halls to our faculty, staff, students, their families, and our community. And within 6 days, served 28,500 meals to our community, donated 10,000 pounds of ice. And for us, that's what it means. That's what it means when we are funded by the state. And thank you for that, for your belief. But then the accountability is what's important to us, to serve our region in all ways. So Georgia Southern is healthy, it is growing, and it is moving forward. And if you stay to the end of a football game, you'll see us in the largest comeback in the history of the stadium last week. But we got a big one tomorrow. This is homecoming week against James Madison. We're the first in the East. They're one of the best teams in the nation right now, particularly in the group of 5. So it's going to be an exciting day tomorrow. But thank you again for being here. Welcome to Georgia Southern University. Thank you.
Thank you, President Marrero. I'm sure, especially with what you've recently done for this community, that the Eagle Nation and Eagle community will come out large for the Eagles tomorrow. So thank you very much for hosting this. I guess with all that, we're ready to get started, Chairman Tillery.
Yes, sir.
Okay, our first presenters this morning are from the Secretary of State's office. Maggie Hasty is here live and in person. Todd Zandrowitz is via Zoom, I guess.
Via Zoom.
Maggie, do you want to go first, or is Todd on? Todd, okay. So Todd, the floor is yours. We don't see you yet, but hopefully we'll see you in just a second.
I got my camera. Can you hear me?
Hey, we see you. Yes.
And you can hear me?
Yes, sir.
You were there for a minute.
We can hear you.
We
fine,
hear you.
Todd.
We hear you. Fine.
Okay.
So you have a presentation, I see.
Yes.
Okay, great.
All right.
How
So
many-
first want to start
many
off by
months
just,
Job, Todd.
I was just going to say, last meeting was on my 2nd month anniversary, and now I am just over 3 months now.
Well, thank you and welcome. Glad you're here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to start by saying thank you, Chairman and members of the committee, for having me back again and to be able to give you an update on the PLB and the call center again. You can go to the next slide. So last time we chatted, I was giving you an update that we were able to clear the queues. I didn't have the exact date in hand, so I wanted to make sure I called that out. So we definitely cleared our phone queues as of 8/27, the night of 8/27 of August. And then since then, kind of pulled some stats there. We've been clearing the queue every single night, and our average calls have been just over 2,600 calls, inbound calls, with an average of just over 1,300 calls from the PLB callers. Our average speed to answer for the PLB calls is just above 30 minutes at 33 minutes. And I did want to just call out there that people can elect a.
Bobby, for
This
1 second.
includes people.
We
oh, go ahead.
lost you for about 30 seconds right there. We
Okay.
heard you were clearing the phone queues each night. If you can go back to where you were on that point, just so we make sure that we heard what you were saying.
Perfect. Yep. Yeah. So I just wanted to call out that we have been clearing the call queues nightly since August 27th, and since then our average inbound calls have been just over 2,600 calls a day, with just over 1,300 calls being from PLB callers calling into anything from that into the PLB, any one of our queues there. And our average speed to answer within those queues has been just over 30 minutes at 33 minutes. And just want to call out that people don't have to wait that long. There's callback options in that, so they can, when they're calling in, they can select to be get a callback, so they're not having to actually just sit and wait on hold and listen to that wonderful music that we have, but they can just get a callback whenever that's it. And then I did want to pull and just kind of show the numbers here from October 1st forward. You can kind of see the data that I pull on a daily basis. So this is just kind of behind the scenes a little bit, but kind of shows our total inbound calls, our PLB inbound calls for just the PLB. Total answered calls. We got our abandonment rate in there, average speed to answer, and the average speed to answer for the PLB, our total talk times and max delays as well. And then head count for the day. So just kind of give you a little bit behind the scenes there, but we're still doing a great job of keeping up. And again, if people are calling in, we're getting them a call back and getting their calls answered within the same day.
Todd, do you care if we start asking you questions as you go through the slides and rather than wait until the end?
Yep, you can surely, shoot.
The first one, head count for the day, is that going to be the number of employees you had at the PLB for that day?
No, this is call center data. So these are the agents, the phone call center agents that I have on the phones actually per day taking calls.
The next thing is, can you walk me through, okay, phone queues? I think I know what that is. I think it's people calling in waiting, but you said you cleared the phone queues on 8/27.
Mhm.
Help understand what you mean by that and what was happening on 8/26.
Yeah, so prior to us clearing the calls, because of the amount of the inbound calls was greater than what we could answer every day, um, we would leave calls in queue. So someone would call in, say on the 25th, and they would call in and they'd be automatically placed into our queue and get a call back. But because of our call volume, we weren't able to call them back until maybe the 27th. So that's what I meant by we were able to clear all the calls that were in the backlog of that, where we were literally having too many calls come in that we were not able to clear them each night. So they carried over to maybe the next day.
So if someone were to call in on the 29th, 2 days after the 27th that you got there, they at least got a call back that day. Is that
Correct. Yep, that is an accurate statement. Yep. So you may have called in at 10 o'clock and then you may have gotten maybe your call back at noon that day. Or maybe you may have called in at noon and got picked up within at 12:05. So depending on that. But yes, every day now, if you call in, you will get your call answered that same day.
one other question I have on this slide? I see your average speed to answers decreased tremendously. I don't want to diminish that in my comment here, but the percent of abandoned calls still seems quite high to me.
Yes, I agree, and I'm trying to understand that because it's kind of not making sense to me, the data that why people are hanging up as much as they are, and I am digging into that in the back end because I too that just seems very high, but a lot of that is driven by other queues outside of the PLB. So I didn't break it down by the PLB versus the other, but we do have corporations calls that come in and also elections, and their abandonment rate is quite high for whatever reason. I'm digging into that to understand why people would be calling in and then hanging up right away. So, and I do have numbers too that show like people who abandon under 60 seconds or under even 120 seconds, so under 2 minutes, because again, that helps me drive down the abandonment percentage. Like, okay, well, 10% abandoned less than a minute. They didn't even give us 1 minute. They must have didn't have all their information ready, and they just hung up on us and didn't even carry through with the call. So, but I am digging into that information as well.
Todd, so you said something just then, I think that may not be apparent, or maybe I misheard you. The call center already also answers calls for elections and the
Corporations.
corporations.
Hmm.
That included in these statistics, or is this just the licensing board?
No, that is included in the total inbound calls. So you can see that I cut out the PLB queues only. So those are just the calls coming into the from PLB callers, but the total inbound includes the elections and corporation calls.
Thank you.
Any other questions from any members right now? Okay, if you're ready for your next slide, Todd, we will be.
Yep, let's go move forward. So wanted to kind of show the next big thing that we've been working on in the PLB since I got in is streamlining our renewals and new applications. So wanted to call out and kind of walk through what we made some changes to. So on this slide, this is an example of a hairdresser. And you can see that the licensee questions are on one slide, one page, and then there's another page, which is where you upload your documents. That I questioned when I got in here, just trying to understand, like, why would we have that separate? It doesn't make sense to be separate. And then seeing on our back end, it's causing confusion. So if you go to the next slide, kind of goes and shows the documents page. So this is again, a current flow that we have not redesigned yet. But on here, based on the questions you answer, you have to then upload specific documents related to that application. And here with the ones that are red asterisks, those are the ones you need to upload. But yet we have other rows out there of other document rows that are not needed. Again, this is causing confusion. And this is stuff that I saw coming in that I'm like, we need to revamp and streamline this process. So if you go to the next slide. This is now for a veterinarian. So we revamped our veterinarian plus master barber and barber 2 renewal process. And here you can see that they have the same things, but now there's just a license questions. There's no documents page. So if you go to the next page, and it's based on how you answer each question. So for the first question, since your last renewal, if you have any arrest, if you say yes, we then make you have to update and upload information and input that information into the application, the renewal. If you go to the next slide. And then here again, so the next question, if you say that you have had disciplinary action, we require that you fill in these fields, and you can't move forward or even hit submit on these applications until all this information is collected. You can go to the next slide. So this is a much more just streamlined process. Again, depending on how you answer the question. But if you in this one, if you've had undergone treatment for drug or alcohol, if you answer no, then this doesn't pop up. But if you answer yes, then we again are collecting the data right there within the application. So it is a much more streamlined and clear process for the applicant. You can go to the next slide. And again, same thing. So we got to the CE credits, making sure that it's clear on how many credits they need based on the years that they were renewing their license. So we have all that information in here. And then if someone says no, then we're asking them to, again, explain why and upload their information. You go next slide. So hopefully all this, again, if you're dispensing drugs, this one, regardless if you answer it, but we are able to, if you say yes, we're collecting data, but on the back end, we're not holding anything up, where the other ones may hold up your application. But it's just a much more streamlined process. Just want to kind of break down each of the questions for you. You go to the next slide. It's kind of just, again, are you a citizen over that? No, then you got to put in that information there. And then the next slide. So all of this to say, which flows have we revamped? I kind of talked to it. We do the master barbers, barber two, and veterinarians. How is the new flow working? So compared to 2022, when we renewed for the first 15 days, we had a snapshot of that, which was great because it was on the 15th that I was looking at this for this year. Master barbers, barber two, and veterinarians, that was the renewal rates. They're under 1% and at 0 for barber two and just over 1% for veterinarians. Already in the first 15 days of this renewal period, Master Barbers is up over 7%, Barber 2 over 11%, and veterinarians almost 20%. And the biggest impact is with the holds on these renewal process. Over 97% of these renewals are going straight through. So we're only putting holds based on the questions that are answered. And for Master Barbers and Barber 2, only 1.2% are being put on hold. And for veterinarians, only just over 2% are being put on hold. So it's a huge decrease to the holds that were going on when we're revamping this process. Because one, again, we're kind of forcing people to answer the questions and upload the documents right away that are needed. So we're getting everything right within the same flow, and it's very easy and streamlined for them to understand what they need when they need it. And that's kind of what our philosophy is just give them and ask them the questions that they need to answer and have them upload the documents when they need to upload documents. Don't ask them a question they don't need to answer, and don't show them any documents that may not need to be uploaded. So again, just kind of changing the philosophy and streamlining our renewal process. Next slide. And that's kind of on the whole revamping of the slide of the new the flows. If there's any questions on that before I go to our next slide. If not, okay. So still with the upcoming modernizations, we're moving forward with a structural transformation process. So this will allow individuals to see their both personal licenses and their facility licenses under one login. As an example, like if someone is a funeral owner of a funeral establishment, they'll be able to see all the licensees associated with his facility, and then any personal licenses that they may hold as well, all under their one login. So we're again revamping the process when someone logs in to be able to see multiple licenses, and if they're owners and individual licenses all in one place, so they don't have to have 2 or 3 logins per license. Our queue system, so we're still working through the requirements with our implementation partner and plan to execute that, implementing that after our structural transformation is live, which we're shooting structural transformation by the end of this year. Implementing upgraded documents reading software. So again, the requirement meetings have begun to move forward with the software. So we're looking forward to that, where the software will be reading the documents that are being uploaded to ensure that they're not expired, that they're the right document, that the names match, that certain criterias match what we're, within the context. So if someone's uploading a passport, does the name match the contact who's applying for the license? And that software will be able to do all that for us. So we're excited for that. And then still we're transitioning to the exception-based processing. So kind of with the new flow, now only less than 3% of our applications the renewals had to be reviewed. So now we're just dealing with the exceptions, where the 97% go straight through. People are getting renewed right away as fast as they can fill out their application and upload all the documents. They hit submit, they get their license renewed that quickly. And that was my last slide.
Anybody on the committee have any questions for Todd?
Todd, I have a few. I'll jump in. I think mine may start some more. One, I know
Okay.
you've been 90 days. The changes you've made in 90 days, we would be probably under complimenting you to say the changes are significant. The data coming, the ability to change just applications to make it streamlined and more user friendly. I know came out of the private sector where that was something you had to do. Appreciate you bringing those skills here. When you're looking now at our processes, you see the application process. You've not necessarily dove into the board processes yet. Do you see additional hiccups, roadblocks, et cetera, that will hinder I'm not trying to get into the board way yet, but that will make it where we cannot just go ahead and grant these licenses especially the renewals, and keep people working? Do you see those roadblocks ahead? I know you're still dealing with the trees you're cutting right now, 90 days in, but what do you see 2 hills out?
Yeah, and I know Maggie will speak to this a little bit because we did from our last meeting that we had. You guys were asking for like, well, what sand we would like to move. So part of that is we are still seeing that certain boards are requiring maybe that they have to review and have sign off by by 3 people on the committee on the board. We're seeing that. So that is spoken to, and I know Maggie, I don't want to take all her wind away from her presentation, but she'll dive into that a little bit more with some areas that I think if we can get changes made there, I think that will help with the process where to your point, if someone applies and does everything needed in the application, when they hit submit, they should get their license. And right now, sometimes those need to be required to go to the board. The board has to review everything, even if everything's there and we say it's all there, they still have to review it and sign off on that.
Another thing, and again, I want to make sure I commend you again for the amazing process. That's all on one of your dates, an hour and a half wait time. Now you're at 17 minutes. I don't want to, again, take that away from you, but 17 minutes is still too long for someone who's trying to get something done and also run a business every day. And what my question is, 16% or 17% of people who are hanging up, whether they're hanging up after 30 seconds because they're so frustrated they called the day before, or they were one of those 1 hour and 30-minute waits the day before and then just gave up. What statistic from your private sector experience are you looking at in the end for this? I see we're at 17% now, and the numbers you've given us.
Yeah.
Where are we heading? Because just because we're 5 times better than we were, if you were really that bad, 5 times better is just not going to.
Correct. You're still, yeah, better than worse is not better. So no, I agree from that perspective. No, I would love our abandonment rates under about 4% is kind of the industry standard that I would be trying to shoot for. And our average wait times, again, anything probably underneath 10 minutes would be kind of a goal that I'm shooting for, is under 10-minute wait times, or average speed answer under 10 minutes. One thing we are looking to do, so again, we're upping right now. I have my supervisor over the call center. She's adding more employees to the call. So again, we're ramping up for election timeframe because we know the calls are increasing with elections coming. So we are doing that, and that will help. But there's some other things up my sleeves that I'm working with leadership to also try to get, and it will help us with our total call volume and being able to answer the calls and timely. Because the main thing too I want to do is I'm behind the scenes too, digging into why are people calling in? What are the main reasons? Can I answer those? And I know last time we talked, there will always be people who call in. Well, that's great. They'll always call in, but I want that to be the minority of the people. And if someone wants to find something on our website or trying to get an update on the status of an application, let's find other ways to give them that information so they don't have to call in. And that those that want to call in, then they'll be able to get a call answered within 10 minutes and under that 10-minute time frame. So there's some things there that I'm working at and still have trying to move forward on the back end.
Todd, how long did we try to get you to come to work with us?
The interview process started in March, and I got my offer in May, and then I was able to start in
It
July.
wasn't years. That's what I was just making sure. It wasn't years, but I'm
No,
glad we found you, and I'm glad you came to work, because it is
yeah,
obvious you've made quite a difference and quite a bit of headway in the short amount of time you've been here. And I look forward to seeing what else you do and the results that you have. So thank you for your time today. Any other questions? Yes. Chairman Prince.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Todd, as far as, is there, for renewals, is there some process that we could put in, or some mechanism we could put in place that sort of triggers those licensees, maybe 3 months out? Hey, you're due 3 months out before they're expired, and then maybe 2 months out, and then maybe 1 month, to sort of head off this last minute portion, them trying to apply, us having problems on our end, and then now they are technically without a license for a short period of time.
Yep.
Oh.
Great point and great question. And it's a neat, simple response because we already do it. So when the renewal period opens, we send out a notification to everyone that the renewal period is open. Then at the 30 days, then again and again in 30 days, we send out another notification. And then the last 30 days, we send out the last 30 days, 20 days, 10 days. So we try to get them, to do it as soon as possible to renew, and get in. So that way, to your point, we're not having this mad dash rush at the end, and then you got all these people are having, again, if they're having issues getting logged in, we can try to address those sooner than later. So that's what we definitely have that in place today. And I definitely wanted to thank the team that, again, I joined a great team, was able to come in with my ideas and kind of the mindset of knowing how Salesforce works. And the team, again, is very open to all my suggestions and everything. And it's awesome to work with such a great team at the PLB and the call center with to be able to make these changes and really make it so much easier for the licensees and applicants to get their licenses a lot faster now. So we're super excited to be able to be moving in the right direction. And again, with such a great and amazing team.
Anybody else? Thank you, Todd, for your time. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Maggie, do you want to? Yeah. Now we have Maggie Hasty, who's the Deputy Chief of Staff and Government Affairs with Secretary of State. Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. I'm excited to be back in front of Blue Ribbon Committee. We've got a presentation. Should be coming up. So to Chairman Tillery's point about what can we do to make licensing easier for the people of Georgia. Just go to the next slide, please. This first slide is kind of the biggest thing that can have the most impactful change for the people of Georgia. For renewals, we're able to just administratively do renewals, but this would be for those initial applicants, those recent graduates who don't have so much as a speeding ticket, getting them licensed as soon as possible. So instead of relying on the boards, waiting for them to meet, allowing the division director to administratively issue those licenses, assuming that people have fulfilled all of the requirements of the law. That being said, we don't want to get rid of the boards. We don't want to lose them, and their industry expertise is important, but we want to utilize them for things that they're more geared towards. So making determinations on unlawful practice or violations of the code, making determinations on applications that have been flagged by the division director, and then also rulemaking. And then also in the code, there are a couple ticky-tacky areas where boards have to review. There's a number of people who have to individually sign off on applications. The board members are typically small business owners. They own firms in their communities, and we're asking them to essentially volunteer maybe 10 hours a month to just review applications for something that the division director could do. And I mean, the division director as the whole division, but through the, with the approval of the division director issuing those licenses. Next. Another thing that we're seeing is that people sometimes have to apply to take an exam, take the exam, and then wait a period of time and then actually apply for a license. So there's just a lot of small areas in the law that could be streamlined, and that's what we're trying to get at. Title 43 is a very big section of the code, and it's been amended by a lot of people. I mean, there's probably half the states interested in Title 43, and has an idea of what it should look like. So there's years of amendments, and we'd love to see them kind of streamlined. One thing that I mentioned at the last meeting, and I'm actually going to sit down with USG next week to talk about this, is allowing universities to send certified copies of graduate lists as opposed to having each individual applicant request a transcript and send it to us. For the most part, we just need to know that they did in fact graduate. We don't need to know exactly what their classes were, with limited exception. And for those exceptions, we'd like to see those requirements either removed or reduced. For example, I know that licensed professional counselors require that their degree cover 9 different areas of expertise. And so the board has to review that actual transcript and determine that they have met those 9 different areas. And so we've had people who graduate with a master's degree have to take years of training underneath someone who is a licensed professional counselor. And then finally they apply and then they find out, oh no, I need 12 more credit hours. And so they're going back and taking more classes. We want to find a way to eliminate that so people can just get licensed quickly. Next. This one, I'm not exactly sure how to do it. I think someone who's an attorney would have a better idea how to make this happen, but allowing for boards to enter into interstate license compacts wherever possible, assuming it is substantially similar to the licensing requirements and scope of practice in Georgia. Right now, I think there's a handful of interstate compacts that we could enter, but it has to go through the legislative process. So finding a way that boards could enter that. Yes.
Are there interstate compacts that Secretary of State's office or boards have brought in the past that we've not passed right now?
Not to my knowledge, but I can get back to you on that.
Okay.
See,
We do have some.
I do believe the dietitians interstate compact was dropped this year, but it was a little bit late in the session.
This is a little early to get ahead of this. This became a real issue during the storm as we were trying to get security guards in. We're having some looting problems.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, you are not licensed across state lines. That was a significant issue. But if I see the legislative suggestion, I appreciate it. Appreciate you bringing it. But if we're not having issues with those interstate compacts getting through the legislature, if you just bring me one time when we haven't been able to get it to the legislature, whatever time, I think it would make more sense. Otherwise, what's wrong with the current process of it being brought?
Absolutely. This is something that we've requested this past session, but it just didn't quite make it through on Sine Die, requiring an electronic continuing education tracker. So the process right now is very old school. People have to renew their license and then we randomly select who gets audited for their continuing education. It's a very manual process. It's a random process. We'll just say, all right, this applicant or this licensee, we need to review their continuing education. We have to manually check that they have to send all of their paperwork. We have to manually check it, make sure that they did complete the required courses. And so it's just a lot of hands-on for our staff. Now, a continuing education tracker that's electronic, we would be able to have all of those applicants input it at the time of renewal, and then it would all be 100% audited. So we wouldn't have to expend staff time reviewing all of those continuing education requirements. And then this is just kind of something that the secretary is interested in which is reducing the requirements for licensure kind of across the board anywhere that we can to remain competitive with other states. We want people to come and work in Georgia. And so we want to have kind of the lowest possible requirements with, of course, maintaining health, safety, and welfare protections for the people of Georgia.
Do y'all have a list of those that you'd like to share with us?
We're working on that. And I think there are a lot of interest groups who have kind of done studies on this that we can pull from to kind of figure out exactly where we can reduce those requirements. One other thing that we could do, and again, Title 43 is a large title, so I don't know exactly what it looks like. The average renewal time is 2 years or sometimes more, but just kind of making sure that that is the standard, if not potentially even moving it to 3 years in the future. And then also reconfiguring the licensing renewal times to be a little bit more dispersed, because we don't want to have these periods of times where multiple licensees are renewing at the same time. And so the call center gets overwhelmed, or we're not able to flex staff to different areas of the division.
I think you got a question here from
Yeah.
Senator Walker on that. Chairman Walker.
Maggie,
Mhm.
thank you for all your work on this. So I'm an insurance agent, and the way we do it is our license renews on our birthday.
Mhm.
So that disperses it throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, right now the system is everyone
Might
does it
be
at the
the
same
month,
time.
or
We could do
birthday.
it the month, birthday, do it by last name. There's a lot of different ways to look at it, but just finding a way that makes sense for Georgia so that we are doing it a little bit more.
Are any
Even
of your
if it's not.
license handled that way?
I think the majority of them are all renewed at the same time.
That apparently it's created a big time bottleneck.
Absolutely.
That things like that would have been done a long time ago. That's good.
Any more questions?
You think that requires legislation? I'm sorry.
I'll have to look into it. I mean,
Seems like y'all can just administrative.
I think some of them are set in law. It's, Title 42 is a very big section. So finding out exactly where.
Chairman Prince has a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, man. And thanks for your work on this. Getting back to the part where we're trying to bring the educators in here, some of the schools, have we not reached out to them already to sort of, I mean, somebody graduate from nursing school at Augusta University, that whole list should already be in the office. They've taken the class, but this is the curriculum. Are we collaborating on some of these things so that, as the Chairman Tiller said, I don't, with the interstate contact, I mean, I don't think we hold it up.
Mhm.
You know, we'll try to push it as much as we can, but the groundwork has to be done prior to it coming to us, because what we don't want is some people slipping through some crack hole. But if the school, if we tie the University of Georgia system into this,
Mhm.
have them have some skin in the game, because they graduate these folks and they want them licensed with their degrees. So has that, or is that something we're looking at trying to?
Yes, that is something that we're looking to try to do. So I'm sitting down with USG next week to kind of get ideas of how this would look for the state of Georgia. And I hope that most universities want their students to get licensed pretty much immediately. I know that in years past, we've partnered with the UGA Vet School to have that list sent to us, and it's worked really well in the past. But there are parts in the law where it says that we need to have transcript. And so we want to be able to remove that requirement. So instead of having that individual transcript requirement, we're just getting that list. And then also there are portions of the code where the board has to individually review that transcript. And so we want to kind of minimize that. So instead of looking at having the board look at every transcript, just know that if someone's graduating from a USG institution, that they're meeting those requirements on the front end and not having to go back and take classes again.
Well, like there's any more questions, Maggie. Thank
Thank
you
you.
all. And thank you, because you've been at every meeting.
Yes.
You've been under fire at several of them. So thank you for standing with us and helping. You've helped solve quite a few issues since we began. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a couple of presentations from individuals that are Zoom. They are both, I think one's in Texas and one is in Colorado. Is that correct? I'm looking at David to make sure, but I'm not sure if we're having Annie or Ronnie or both. Annie. So Annie Miller is a policy associate with the National Council of State Legislators. And she supports employment, labor, and retirement programs for them. And I would like to welcome Annie.
Thank you. Thank you
Hey.
so much for having me, and thank you to
Annie,
Dave.
nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you all as well. I think I just need to share my screen here quickly, and then we can get started. Okay, can everyone see this?
We see it, yes.
Great. Okay, so thank you all again for having me here. Like the chairman mentioned, my name is Annie Miller, and I'm a policy associate for the Employment, Labor, and Retirement team at the National Conference of State Legislatures. So as you may know, NCSL is the bipartisan membership and professional development organization for state legislators and legislative staff in all 50 states and territories. We provide research, testimony, and technical assistance to states, and those are just a few of the ways that we help legislative institutions function. So first, I want to give a quick preview of what I plan to cover today. I know all of your time is valuable, so I'll only plan to speak for about 15 minutes. and hopefully answer some of your questions during a Q&A before I hand it over to Ronnie. And during the presentation, I'll provide an overview of some relevant lessons that we learned from our work on the Occupational Licensing Learning Consortium. And then I'll highlight a few licensing structures used by other states and provide some relevant examples for those processes. And I also have several resources that I plan to highlight as well. And you can find those linked in my presentation that I'm sure you have with you. Okay, so as I mentioned, NCSL has been working with states on occupational licensing for about 6 years now. In partnership with the Council of State Governments and the National Governors Association in 2017, we received funding from the U.S. Department of Labor's Employment and Training Administration to look at how states can reduce barriers to licensed occupations. An important component of this project was the Multi-State Learning Consortium. So through a competitive application process in 2017, 11 states became part of that consortium. And after receiving additional funding, we expanded to 16 states. And these states brought stakeholder teams together. And those teams were comprised of legislators, legislative staff, and governor's offices, as well as state agency and department heads and regulatory board heads. And the main goal here was for participating states to take a deeper dive into their licensing barriers and create attainable goals for improving outcomes for workers. And a component of this investigation revealed insights into a lot of the state's regulatory structures. The report found that more autonomous boards may benefit from efficiency gains and greater professional expertise, but on the other hand, more centralized boards may enjoy lower administrative costs and higher levels of coordination and potential liability protection as well, that is associated with state oversight. So for the occupational boards that were located in more centralized structures, there can be opportunities to advance reforms quickly based on close organizational relationships. So for example, Maryland was focused on reforming several targeted occupations that were organized underneath its centralized department. And even though the boards were the ultimate decision makers here, with the reform strategies, the regulatory structure facilitated the interactions and helped secure buy-in for a lot of these measures. And in addition to the direct references to regulatory structure in the report, there are also many indirect references. So some of the consortium states identified licensure portability, efficiency, or accessibility as their main action items. However, during the course of the consortium and their conversations with other states, they began to realize that many of their smaller licensing issues are not easily fixed on a surface level. A seemingly small reform could end up requiring a structural or even institutional change. So that is kind of what I wanted to cover just as a brief overview of what the consortium was, and that information can all be found in this report that's available on NCSL's website. And it goes really in depth into all the revelations from these conversations. But with that, I want to dive into some licensing structures employed by other states. So the graph on the screen here is taken from a 2020 report that was facilitated by NCSL and conducted by the Council on Licensure Enforcement and Regulation, or CLEAR. And Ronnie Hines, who will be speaking after me, I'm sure is very familiar with this resource as well. And so to form the conclusions in this report, a survey was disseminated by CLEAR asking states to indicate which licensing model best represented the model that they are currently in use by their regulatory organization. So respondents representing 45 states in the District of Columbia submitted the responses, which are summarized in the graph that you see here. And one of the most important conclusions to draw from this graph is that Model C was identified the most frequently as the regulatory structure used in states. Model C is a hybrid structure where licensing boards are autonomous from each other, and they're overseen by a central agency responsible for housekeeping, budget, personnel, investigations, and discipline. And I know some people probably in this room may categorize Georgia into this model as well. Another conclusion to draw here is that the bulk of state respondents said they are represented in the first 3 models on the graph, models A through C. And this means that the variations of decentralized models are more frequently implemented than variations of centralized or other models. And one thing to note before putting too much stock in these conclusions is that the data collection method here is not perfect. There were many respondents who reported in different licensing model than other respondents that were from their same state, for example. And additionally, some respondents selected a combination of multiple different models in use in their state. And this just demonstrates the complexity and the variation of licensing architectures across jurisdictions, occupations, and governance structures throughout the US. However, I do want to reiterate that I think this graph gives a great overview of where most states fall in terms of their licensing structure. And I highly encourage you to read the rest of CLEAR's US Regulatory Structures Report from 2020 for additional clarity on the survey and its findings. So although CLEAR's report organizes licensing structure using models A, B, C, D, and E, today I just want to focus on 3 overarching state strategies. The first approach is decentralized, where the boards are fully autonomous and independent from each other. And in this case, boards will hire their own staff, and they are responsible for setting qualifications and standards for practices for licensees. And they're also responsible for preparing, administering, and grading licensing examinations, in addition to collecting fees and maintaining financial records. And a few states who fall into this category are Oregon, Nevada, and North Dakota. This list is not exhaustive. This is just what I pulled together. And a second approach is a centralized licensing structure, where a central agency or licensing division has a final decision-making authority, and boards are only utilized in an advisory capacity. Typically, an agency, director, or commission runs the regulatory system with or without the assistance of a board, and boards may be delegated such functions as preparing, approving, or contracting for examinations, setting pass-fail points, or recommending professional standards to that central agency. And some jurisdictions who fall into this form include Illinois, Michigan, and Utah. The third approach that I'll cover today is the combination of decentralized and centralized. And this is similar to Model C that was defined by the CLEAR report. And boards in this model maintain their autonomy or independent decision-making authority, but a central agency is responsible for various other tasks like budget, personnel, and records. And a central staff can also handle complaints and investigations and hearings, even when boards continue to make those final decisions with respect to the disciplinary actions. A couple examples of this approach include South Carolina, Maine, and Montana. And of these models, I've also chosen 3 states to take a closer look at. Oops, excuse me. Each state represents a different licensing structure. As I mentioned, Oregon utilizes a decentralized licensing structure. Each of Oregon's occupational licensing boards have been established independently in statute, and there is no centralized agency to oversee the operation of each board. The decentralized structure grants individual boards full responsibility and authority to license individuals, set qualifications, determine and collect those fees, and enforce regulations of each profession. The funding structure is difficult to determine within this approach. However, the state does provide a general outline of how the boards are supposed to function. All of the fees or other funds received by a professional licensing board must be paid into the state treasury regularly, and the payments are then credited to separate accounts in the general fund for each board. And the payments constitute continuous appropriations made from the general fund to carry out the functions of that board. And all necessary expenses of each board shall be paid only after the approval by the chairperson or administrator of the board as well. Next, we have Illinois, and Illinois structure is centralized under the authority of the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. And this means that the department has final decision-making authority, and the traditional occupational boards exist. However, they are strictly advisory. The funding model for this structure is more straightforward. Illinois statutory code specifies that a profession's indirect cost fund is created to act as a special fund in the state treasury. And the fund receives the money resulting from fees and fines associated with the licensing of regulated professions, trades, and occupations. And then finally, South Carolina represents a combination of centralized and decentralized models. However, South Carolina does lean more slightly to the centralized side of things. While each board here is separate and maintains discretion over licensing decisions, they still fall under the authority of the Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation. The umbrella agency in this case was responsible for the administration, budget, personnel, investigations, and discipline. And with respect to funding, the director of the department is required to maintain a separate account for funds collected on behalf of each board. And the revenue funded boards are expected to provide a statement of anticipated expenditures, program changes, and other information to the director so they can properly determine fees over the next biennial period. And the final example I have for the committee today is a case study of Kentucky from several years ago. Kentucky was one of the original 11 states that were selected for the consortium. And as a part of their experience, they had to define goals and important action items for the state related to occupational licensure. One of Kentucky's goals was to address the challenges and barriers encountered when attempting to reform a decentralized licensing structure. The project goal resulted in a multi-year effort to organize all the boards under the state's Department of Professional Licensing to establish active state supervision. The effort ultimately was unsuccessful in both the 2018 and 2019 legislative sessions. However, the state did succeed in reorganizing its 4 real estate licensing boards under the Kentucky Real Estate Authority within the Department of Professional Licensing. And I wanted to highlight this example just to showcase a recent attempt at changing a state's current licensing structure. This type of change is not a small undertaking, and efforts to reform may encounter significant pushback from stakeholders. And finally, I just want to go over some major considerations associated with pursuing a different licensing structure. The first decision, which I'm sure you're fairly familiar with now, is selecting a decentralized, centralized, or a combination structure for the licensing divisions. You must also consider the resources that you have available. How many people can work as staff? Will you be able to support the salaries of the staff people? Will the boards be governed by explicit statutory requirements or through a rulemaking process? And moving forward, what will be required of boards in terms of reporting and data infrastructure? Will there be a tracking component associated with the licensure process in order to follow applicants as they move through that system? And funding decisions are also extremely important. How will the boards or agencies determine and collect fees, and what kind of timeline will be used, as well as will a portion of money be appropriated? So I know it's coming to a close now, so here are some additional resources as well as links to some of the databases that we maintain at NCSL and where we've pulled some of this information from. Of course, the strategies I've covered today are not the only things that states have done, but they are some of the most prominent. And as states introduce and pass more legislation related to licensing challenges, you'll be able to find them in our 50 state bill databases, which are linked here that I mentioned. And otherwise, I think that's my time. So thank you again to the committee for having me here to speak. And here's my contact information as well. And I'm happy to take some questions now.
Thank you, Annie. I think it's obvious we're a combination, kind of like very similar to South Carolina, but it is interesting to see that there are so many different, all the states, just that we're all over the board. So I guess that's why we have states. But Chairman Prince had a question.
Yes, thank you, Annie, for that presentation. And based off your research and your resources, and what we have here in Georgia, I'm not sure if you studied that, but what recommendation would you make as far as, or would you make a recommendation as far as something that we could possibly do, whether it's South Carolina or Michigan, whatever? Would you, any recommendation that you get for us to make us more efficient?
Thank you for that question. Unfortunately, I cannot weigh in. As a employee at NCSL, we remain completely bipartisan, and so I cannot provide you with a recommendation today, only an overview of what I know other states have done and what they've seen in the kind of ecosystem that they're using.
Good answer, thank you.
Annie, this is Blake Tiller. I've got a different question. Let's see. You've looked at various states. how does Georgia compare as to the number of occupations it licenses? So do other states license more occupations, fewer occupations? Where do we fall on the spectrum? And can you tell us what you see as the ends of that spectrum for more, most and the least, as we now dive into after the fact finding missions that will probably end the day, into some of the recommendation procedures?
Just to clarify your question, are you asking in terms of the amount of occupations that you license, or in terms of the amount of licenses per year that you issue?
Occupations. 'Cause I
Okay.
don't think that would be based on population. Obviously, the second part would be based on population. Higher population states are going to issue more licenses. I'm wondering as to occupations. Where do we fall on the spectrum of, do we license more than most states? Do we license less than most states?
I don't have that information available offhand, but I'm thinking of the Institute for Justice, which has really great reports on each state and where they fall in terms of barriers to licensure. So they basically categorize each state based on the amount of regulation that they have and the level of difficulty there is for an applicant to become licensed. So I would encourage you to go seek out the Institute for Justice reports on occupational licensing and evaluate where Georgia might fall on this.
Thank you.
So in some of the licensing work, legislative work I've done over the last couple of years in the study committee that I had, I've seen statistics where Georgia was ranked 38 most burdensome in the country for licensing and burden, and that we're kind of sort of fall kind of in the middle, seems like, as far as the burden, when Institute for Justice and those kind of organizations rank us.
Representative Franklin.
I just got a quick question. I might have missed this in your earlier comments, but the data that you put up, I think on the second screen there, was that all of the states, or was that just the 16?
The survey was disseminated to all 50 states. I believe there was only 45 states represented in the survey, as well as the District of Columbia.
Well, Annie, I think that's all the questions. Thank you for your time. Okay. Thank you for your time. And I don't know if you're staying on or not, but you're welcome to continue to watch. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Next up is Ronnie Hines, Miss Ronnie Hines. And I'm gonna read what I have here because it is, I think, fairly impressive and applicable to this committee. Ronnie's a partner at the Regulatory Consulting Group, where her dedication to regulation, governance, ethics, labor mobility, and innovation come together to inform a new discussion about smart regulation. Ronnie's been immersed in professional and occupational licensing and regulation across more than 50 health and technical professions, and had the privilege of serving as president of the Council on Licensure Enforcement and Regulation. As the past director of Colorado's Division of Professions and Occupations, Ronnie demonstrated her willingness to build strategic relationships to deliver key objectives across the state, streamline licensing timelines, and develop alternative pathways to licensure across more than 50 professions and 500,000 licensees. Sounds exactly what something we might be looking at doing. So, Ronnie, thank you for being on, and we don't see you yet. Here you come. I hope you heard me.
Can you hear me?
Very impressive resume, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. They're going to control my slides because that is not my strong suit. I have many strengths, but technology is not one of them. So thank you very much for having me and for the kind introduction. As you mentioned, I'm past president for CLEAR, the Council on Licensure Enforcement and Regulation. And CLEAR, if you don't know, their purpose is, they're an international organization, and their purpose is really to bring the regulatory community together and exchange information, education, and training, and serve as a central information clearinghouse to try to identify best practices. And they're are parts of my presentation that might overlap a little bit with Annie's, and I'll go through those slides more quickly to be thoughtful about your time today. So if we can move to the next slide. As Annie discussed, I really want to share some experiences of states that have centralized their boards. And it sounds like you've had some other discussions on what autonomous boards versus centralized boards might look like. And there are definitely merits to both systems. I might be a little bit biased after administering the division for about 7 years and being with them for 15 years, but there are large economies of scale as a centralized agency, including perhaps a single database for multiple professions, streamlining processes and finding some consistencies, not just for licensing, but for complaint processing, board oversight, investigations, and inspections. While on the other hand, the independently housed autonomous boards might be more highly specialized. But I think in both cases, it's really important to recognize that the boards, whatever agency is helping the boards do their work, they really do value the expertise of the profession and the board. So let us go to the next slide. This just gives you a little bit of a snapshot of how it's evolved over the years. It's not new. It's definitely evolved. New York was the first state to centralize, and there was an increase during the 60s to the 70s. And in 1990, the number continued to grow to about 33 states. So we're seeing more and more states become some version of centralized. So let's go to the next slide. And as Annie mentioned, with the survey partnering with NCSL and CLEAR, it's not perfect data, right? You're relying on the information that is reported, but about 37 centralized states in some version, and that can really range in that category. To Annie's point, it's how they report it. So it can be centralized decision making or autonomous decision making boards, and it really can be the individual autonomy of the boards. So it's not so much that we're bad at math. We know there's 50 states in the District of Columbia, but CLEAR has also included some U.S. territories based on some of their additional research, and there are some straggling autonomous boards across those. But when we tally up the models, we really wanted to see how the map in gray looked, and mostly the centralized are in blue. So it's really a mix of those, just for a quick visual. And then next slide, please. So really the principles of centralization is grouping agencies into broad functional areas, and minimizing the departments that those are structured under to enhance the span of control, pinpoint responsibility, and really provide single lines of authority to improve processes and administration by a department or an individual, and not necessarily by an individual board or commission. So those are the basic tenets of centralization. Next slide, please. But the one thing I would encourage you to remember, and I guess it's a little bit dated depending on how much you think about it, but at the end of the day, it's really about a state board ran by private actors in the marketplace taking action, right? And so they're taking action based on mandates of law. But you should remember, if you're not already familiar with the North Carolina Dental Board case, where it was really determined that boards should have active supervision by the state. So next slide, please. So I will tell you, states have interpreted this differently, the FTC versus the North Carolina Dental Board, and you probably have seen a lot about that case. The issue really was that it really pointed the need to active state supervision of a board by the state, and really needing boards where they encouraged a controlling number of public member of active market participants rather than professional members. I think that is not done as often as perhaps the opinion might indicate. But there are ways of doing that and finding that active supervision. And so that is a determination in centralizing as well as autonomous boards and what that looks like, just to make sure that there is active supervision and the ability to maintain public protection. And so the next few slides I'll go through quickly because Annie covered them with the different models. So you have the no central agency, you have autonomous boards with the central agency that has routine administrative functions. You have autonomous boards with a central agency with minimal functions. It might be budget or personnel. In the next slide. Another model where board actions might be subject to review by a central agency. And lastly, complete authority by a central agency. So there's obviously a lot of combinations of that, but I wanted to give you a few examples. And obviously I'm well versed in Colorado's background, so we'll go forward. And time permitting, I am happy to skip through some of them, but if we can move the next slide quickly and then and we'll start with Colorado. So the Department of Regulatory Agency houses 10 different divisions, and it really is focused on centralizing not just occupational licensure in the Division of Professions and Occupations, but there, for example, is a division of real estate, a division of insurance. So it's a multifaceted regulatory organization. The division housed what we called Type 1 and Type 2 boards and committees. So Type 1 autonomous boards, they had decision-making authority. Type 2, we called them, and mostly we called them director models. So that was where the division director ultimately had decision-making authority for licensing and for discipline. And those numbers were growing and are continuing to grow for the director model. In addition to having administration over some housekeeping functions, the division also did provide administrative support that ranged from call centers to centralized licensing. It also included centralized investigations. It included a centralized office of what we called expedited settlement to help settle cases that might result in discipline, and really just found ways to streamline. I would also note that Colorado is one of the original members of the NCSL consortium. But as you mentioned in my introduction, we housed about 50 professions. Colorado is known as a light regulatory state. But that is about 500,000 licensees, and the Division of Professions and Occupations also had about 200 FTE, if that's helpful. So across all those different functions to support the boards. And so with that, if we could go to the next slide. Licensure is definitely established in statute. The boards had rulemaking authority to clarify that. And they did conduct rulemaking with the support of the administrative staff. And ultimately had decision-making on what examinations to approve or accept for licensure. But I will tell you, one of the first steps, although they were a centralized division, one of the first steps internally that the division took a number of years ago was to centralize their licensing staff. So since renewals were spread across the entire year, and most, I think, similar to what we've seen for you, about every 2 years was the renewal period. They tried to separate those by workload and then would do those by month. And so with that, many of the licensing staff would handle multiple professions, and most of those applications could be processed by licensing staff, and then obviously would get ratified by the boards for the larger grouping, and then the boards would look at applications that required additional review. So next we go to investigations. Investigations, as I mentioned, was centralized as well. So about, I think, 15 investigators served all 50 professions and maintained their timelines to provide information to the boards in an investigatory report. They often were also able to assist the board along with staff to open a complaint when needed and conduct that investigation and provide the information to the board. Ultimately, though, obviously, the discipline was the board's ultimate determination and any resulting sanction. But investigators were well versed in the process, and many had specialty areas of focus, but they were able to serve all of the professions. And so next slide. And so I wanted to highlight the fiscal piece. I don't think Colorado is unique, but they are supported entirely by licensing fees. The department, along with the division, does set those fees for every renewal cycle and for applications, new applications. So the budget is developed and administered by the division. Occasionally, the division would receive funding from the legislature for new legislation, but it was a very rare instance that there was general funding. It was based on the licensing of each individual board. And so I would emphasize as well, as a central agency, even though there was one budget, each board maintained their own allocation. So they were responsible just for what served that board. Um, some of the streamlining that we were able to do, we focused on a life of a case and took it down by about 20 days. One of our other main goals had been, and continues to be for the division, approving applications within 30 days. And the average for all applications were about 15. And a great example was taking like barber and cosmetology from 45 days down to 8 days. And then we'll go on to couple other states quickly. So Florida, similar, the Department of Health and Department of Business and Professional licensing houses most of the boards, with a few exceptions. The boards determine the areas of competency on exams and the weight, and could intervene. The department could intervene if it didn't adequately measure an applicant's competence practice. Next slide, please. Similar to Colorado, the boards maintained rulemaking authority. But here in Florida, it's interesting, the department had the authority to challenge the rules or proposed rules to make sure that it would protect the public and didn't restrict competition and didn't unnecessarily increase the cost of professional services without an equal public benefit. Those challenges were heard by the Division of Administrative Hearings. I do think other states have similar protections, maybe a different way to administer it. So in comparison, Colorado's Office of Legislative Services would review every rule. And if they had a concern, then the division did have to appear in front of the committee and establish whether the rule was within the statutory authority. So next slide. Florida also has investigations where complaints are received and investigated by the department and then passed to panels designated by the board. Discipline is ultimately set by the board, but the agency can review the information to determine probable cause. Next slide, please. Again, fiscal background, Florida is funded by fees. Those fees are actually appropriated by the legislature, and the budget is overseen by the agency. So a little bit of a mix, which I think you now have heard a lot today. And the last model, which Annie highlighted a little bit, but I love to highlight, I really respect my former counterpart there. The Division of Occupational and Professional Licensure, DOPL is what they like to call themselves. They're an interesting centralized agency in the fact that all of their boards are advisory in nature only, which obviously provides the centralized staff an ability to make a lot of changes. They are responsible for all licensing functions, whether that's issuing, refusing, revoking, renewing, whatever that may be, and acting upon any licensee. Next slide. The division there also has the authority to prescribe, adopt, and enforce rules, but they do have to consult the advisory boards. They can also initiate investigations and have related authorities, subpoenaing witnesses and taking evidence. Next slide. Those decisions are really ultimately made by DOPL. The boards and commissions are there. And I think in other ways, other centralized agencies find ways to do this, whether it's using an expert, a consultant, or or the board to really figure out what the appropriate action is. And so we'll go to the next slide, which are those models that Annie highlighted and I briefly touched on. It really is a different scale, and the steps that can be anywhere in between. Reform efforts really go up and down the scale. So depending on the state's need, the state's desire, I think there are lots of options and examples really to set forward. And next slide. As one example, Michigan undertook a study of its regulatory programs and decided to group its professions under an umbrella board and to try to centralize. It was already a Model C state, so it wasn't enough to move to active supervision, but it does move the needle to think about what that looks like with a little bit of a mixed model. And next slide, North Carolina, they also conducted a study to look at different options from centralizing to deregulating. And the recommendations of the commission that undertook that effort ultimately the decision was made not to centralize. They did recommend to deregulate some professions and to make some other tweaks. So the deregulation effort, again, was not enough to take them to a different model, but like Michigan, it does somewhat move the needle. And then next slide, Oklahoma. Oklahoma advanced its model in passing legislation under the Department of Labor. They had a central coordinating entity for the reporting of licensing information. Essentially, they created a centralized database while noting a strong model. It is a housekeeping duty, but I will say the centralized IT component is life-saving. I know that during the pandemic, Colorado, again, was able all of our applications were online. I still say "are" because I've only been gone a couple of years, but all of the applications were online, the renewals, the original applications, and the complaint form was online. So when the pandemic happened, we were able to move all 200 staff to remote, but continue the work and serve the public. And then last, we will look at Mississippi. They took a giant stride. They went from a Model A or a B with autonomous boards to active state supervision. It's a little different in that the commission has some oversight authority of boards, but they're not really centralized. So one last that I would just recommend looking at, New Hampshire's efforts are a little bit new. They created an umbrella agency with significant administrative support and authority. So you definitely are seeing the trend towards that. And I think really it's more a matter of how much authority the division maintains and in supporting the boards, and then of course respecting the board's autonomy. So what is the problem you're trying to solve? If we can go to the next slide, think about the coordination and the oversight. Can we go to the next slide? I'll keep talking anyway. Oh, one more. Thank you. Think about the coordination. There's a lot of streamlining that can be done just administratively, and then just the oversight. And if you hear my dog outside, I'm very sorry. And then just thinking about the performance and consumer safety outcomes. I think that was always the primary focus for Colorado, and I know it is for every agency and board, to protect the consumers. And then thinking about the cost and efficiency, of course, is a factor. So just thinking about what problem is it that you want to solve. And with that, thank you so much for having me here today. And I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ronnie. I do want to go back to, I think it was slide 7, 8, or 9 or something, where you did mention the trying to keep a balance of true professionals and those involved in these committees versus and some public that may not be involved in that particular profession. I think that's a great point that you made. I think we may have had and may have that issue in existence right now on some of our boards. So it's something that we can look at in the future. Thank you. Anybody have any other questions or comments? I think you answered a lot of questions in your presentation, so thank you. I can foresee that we may be reaching out to you in the future about some advice on some things you've seen in other states. So thank you very much for your time.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Next, we're going to move on to our public comment session of our meeting. And to do that, I think Speaker Burns may have a constituent here that he would like to introduce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would. But I'd like to say to those that are here for the public comment portion of this meeting, know that when the Lieutenant Governor Jones and I talked about this issue that inundated members in the House, and Maggie, thank you for being here. And we talked about what we could do to work in conjunction with Secretary of State's office to make this, to solve this problem, come up with solutions. The folks that have been on this panel that have met, this is the fourth time, Mr. Chairman's fourth time I was with y'all in Macon when you met there. They're the top leaders in the House. These are good common sense legislators who solve problems. And that's who we wanted on this panel. And that's what we'll get out of this panel when there'll be solutions developed here coming from this panel, and there'll be common sense. These are guys, this blue ribbon panel is populated by problem solvers, tried and true in the House and Senate. I also want to mention one thing, Maggie, I'll say this to you. This is an issue that's important to all Georgians. And I'll focus on one of those. One of them is a lot of folks need a second income for the family. Some folks it's the primary income on what licensure brings to them. One young lady that I've dealt with, who's a neighbor of mine, Christy Spear Roadwalk, she's been attempting to turn in her apprenticeship hours. So then she can stand to take the licensure test. We need to look at this whole gamut of how we qualify and how we move this process forward. She's been unable to even turn in her apprenticeship hours. So members, I'll ask you not just look at specifically on renewal of licenses, but how the whole process works as we look for those common sense solutions to this issue that impacts so many Georgians. Mr. Chairman's members, I wanted to bring someone to you today who has a broad range of experience from the side that we sit on in government. Vera Jones has served 16 years in local government over in Effingham County, my home county, on the school board and on the county commission, where she did exceptional work and was recognized for that. And she did leave on her own accord. So that was a good thing, but she could have been there as long as she needed to be, because as long as she wanted to be, because she was very effective. But Vera is a business person. She's an entrepreneur. She's a person who's put herself out there to provide the opportunity for a lot of folks to work. I think her issue was with the facilities license and the ability after 17 years, she'll tell you more, but in this space to not be able to get a renewal. So as a consequence, she's moved on to something else because she is a very innovative, common sense, solutions driven person. And when I spoke to Vera just a moment ago, I said, say what you need to say, Vera. She says, I'm going to bring some solutions. So with that, committee, I'm proud to tell you that my friend Vera Jones is here, and I very much look forward to hearing what Vera has to tell us and tell about her experience. Please, is that appropriate, Mr. Chairman? Right up front, is that where you want, Vera?
Yes, sir. Thank
Vera, thanks for taking time for being here. I know it's important. You have a lot going on in your life, you and Dennis. They're contractors, home builders. They do a lot of different things over in the Savannah and Effingham area. So we appreciate you being here, and thanks. We'll
Thank
hear
you.
from you.
Thank you for having me and allowing me to speak today. And thank you all for caring enough to be here today, for pulling this together. And I've taken the liberty of writing some notes because whether you love him or hate him, I'm kind of like Donald Trump. If I get off task, there's no telling I'll probably get real offensive. So I'm gonna try to stick to the points. I served for almost 16 years in public service, 2 terms in school board, 2 terms in county commission. I appreciate you saying I was never voted out, and probably I believe I could have still been there for sure. I ran because I care about the people. I care about serving the people and helping the people, and I did it with a dogged determination. And that's why I'm here today, because I am not going to continue trying to have a hair salon because I'm 61 years old and I'm tired of fighting with the state. And I don't get tired of fighting. But in this particular case, it just makes more sense for me to take I have a commercial building. And the reason I had a facility license was because I had a commercial building and I had a hair salon in there that was about to go out of business. And she came to me and said, I'm going to have to go out of business. And I said, well, she said, I'm going to sell it. And I said, well, what do you want for it? And So I bought her hair salon, not really wanting to operate a hair salon, but wanting to keep a good business that was already set up in my building functioning because I'm solution oriented. And so we have a commercial strip on State Highway 21 in Effingham County that has 7 businesses, and one of them is that hair salon that I've had a license at for 17 years. And so one of the things, whether it's sarcastically or jokingly, but actually very serious at the same time, is as a solution, I've never had a problem before until a year ago. So why don't we go back to what was working? I don't know what's happened. I don't know what change took place, you know, but I think it's a change in the computer system. I'm not really sure, actually. But the solution is it always worked. We had a license. All of our information is the same. I'm in the same location. I'm the same person. I'm an American citizen. There's no different information. I've never had any kind of problem with my license. I've never been censured. I've never received any kind of problem. So when I send in my renewal fee online and all my same information, it should just automatically renew like it always did for 15 years in a row. So why not now? Why are thousands of people having to call your state every day because that's not happening automatically like it always did? You know, there's a saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Somebody broke it. And, you know, one of the quotes I put in my son's senior yearbook 100 years ago was, if it ain't broke, break it, because I'm about improvement. I'm all about moving forward, doing better. We can make something better, but they went backwards. Like if you're being able to renew your license automatically every year, and then all of a sudden you just can't, we're crying, begging, calling a state representative for help, and I still don't have my license renewed. And so I'm going to go through some of the points because I actually did get off task. And so we need somebody in charge that cares and is competent. You know, I'm a real get to it person, and I'll find ways to go about doing that. And I can tell you the answer is, if you get the right person in the right place and they're competent, they'll fix this for you, period. No matter how many different things you listen to. We need proactive, not reactive. If I've applied online for a license and you have all my documents, why do I have to call you and hold for 3 hours and hope to get a person on the phone that won't even help me? You have my information. Why do I need to call you? You know you have it. Somebody should be sitting there working what's already in the system. And I don't understand why that's not taking place. And I say to you, one of the questions I wanted to just say, I really want to bring a true heartfelt understanding of I heard the word burden earlier, of the burden that you're placing on people that are trying to make a living, small businesses. We're supposed to be the #1 state in America for business. If this word really gets out, we won't be first. We won't even be 10th. We won't be 20th. You can't get a license to operate. How can you be first when you can't even obtain a license? When all the information that was always good every year previously is not working now. I'm not here as a hairstylist. I've never styled hair. I'm here as a business professional and a small business owner. I own that commercial building and I have a facilities license. So my questions are, what happened? Why did it become so hard? Why is it not working? Like, if you can get to the root of what happened, do you guys even know that? Like, what happened? Why did it work and then it didn't? Something changed. Why are you unable to simply renew licenses? Is it happening to all industries or just a couple of industries? Because I don't think it's happening to all industries. Am I right about that? Because there's something with that, okay? And I'll tell you how furious that makes me, right? You have a system that works for other industries but doesn't work for our industry. Why is that? So what?
I think he was saying it's happening in other industries. I'm sorry.
It's happening to other industries, but not all industries. So my point is, if 10 of them are working and 10 of them aren't, let's do what's working on the 10. Like, there's a simple answer to all these problems if you get somebody that actually cares. Whatever's not working, if they've got us on some other goals, and it's not working, move us back to the other platform that works. Whatever you need to do quickly, because people need to operate business. Do you understand what happened to the hair salon industry during COVID? Y'all closed us down. I lost people after that. Okay, so when I say I run a facilities, I rent chairs to girls. Each one of those chairs chairs. They pay me something every week to rent a chair, just like I rent the spaces in that building. So after COVID, there was some people that after being closed down, they just couldn't do it anymore. They had to go find other work, right? So then I make less money. I don't have all those chairs full that I used to have full. And now when the state won't give me a license, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to rent the space to somebody that wants to fight with the state and get a license, and I'll just rent the space. So that's what I'm going to do effective January 1st. One of the girls in my salon has applied for her facilities license. Okay. And if she is fortunate enough to obtain that, then she's going to run it and just pay me rent for the space. So the history of what happened with me on 11/21/23, which was 2 days before Thanksgiving last year, my only son and my only grandchildren have moved to Dallas, Texas, and they were visiting my home for a couple of days for Thanksgiving. On that day, I received a phone call from my hair salon that the state auditor person that comes in and checks had said that my license had expired. And although she had signed off on it when she was in there last time, showing it was good, so I thought it was good, I didn't catch that it had expired because she signed off it had not expired, because she looked at my local license, because I have to have a local license, I have to have a corporate license, I have to have, many licenses, right? So one got missed by my employee. So she calls me on the phone. I'm like, no problem. I'll get online and I'll reapply for it right this minute. And she's like, you can't do that. She said, it's been a long enough time now. You're going to have to apply for a new license. You can't apply for reinstatement, and unless you were to pay a fee of $500 a day. And I said, well, that's not a realistic. Nobody can do that. So I got online and I applied for a new license, printed all the docs, got all of them notarized that day, took a 3-hour continuing education course that I had never had to take before because I'm grandfathered in. I spent my entire day with somebody on the telephone from the state doing that instead of visiting with my family from Texas. Ruined my entire Thanksgiving. But I felt sick because I was like, I can't let my girls down. These girls that have hair license that rent a chair for me depend on me to keep my license straight. So I felt terrible about that. But I did everything, jumped through every hoop, everything that was asked of me, sent it in. 90 days after that, I get a letter in the mail that says, you're missing these documents. We need these documents. Although those documents told me in the system they downloaded. Okay. I run several businesses. I have to have several different kinds of licenses. I'm a licensed builder in the state of Georgia. Like, I understand how to apply for a license. I know what you need, and had no problems. And so it said all the documents were received. So I take all those documents that I already had sent that showed they downloaded in the system, sent them overnight mail to the post office with a letter that said, these said they downloaded, but here they are again. And I requested a signature, and I have a signature from the person that signed for it. And that was like March, and then nothing. So in the summertime, I see on Facebook a girl post about, are y'all having license trouble? And she said, anyone having as much trouble as me trying to renew their hair license? And I see all these these additional posts. Let me read just a couple of them to you. Joy Capwell, Aiken. I finally got mine by writing a letter to the state board. They had me listed as an illegal alien. I had to submit my passport and my license and have that notarized. I've been a hairstylist for 40 years. So after 40 years of obtaining her license, she's an illegal alien somehow. And if it was just, when I just thought it was me, I was like, okay, this is just me. I wasn't going to contact him for that. But when I saw all these people, like, we've struggled, 3 girls in my salon, we don't know what to do. We don't know what to do. We don't know what to do. I could read all these to you. But what I understood then was, this is a pervasive problem all of a sudden in the state of Georgia. And why is that? Right? So that's why I contacted him, and he's like, we're working on it. We're having meetings and this and that. And, I said, you know what, Representative Burns, I said, I applied for a new license. So now when I get my license every year, I've got to take 3 hours of continuing education. I don't even do hair. And I was grandfathered in before that. I'd like to just be able to apply and get my license reinstated, because I'm hearing that what that girl told me on the phone, shall I say, was a lie or incorrect, one or the other. It was not actual truth. So he got somebody from his office to help so that I could, because they said that's what's supposed to happen. You're supposed to be able to apply for reinstatement. So I paid the $100 for a new license, and I've now paid $300 to reinstate a license. So I want you to know I've applied two ways: new license, reinstate license, $100, $300.
And you
Started
still don't
11
have
months
your
ago.
license.
I still don't have a license. So that's why a month ago I said, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I'm too old to care, right? But I'm here today because I care about everybody else. All these young girls that are trying to make a living in the state of Georgia, are they supposed to operate without a license? Do you know, I'm not a fearful person. And frankly, my personality was this about it. I got all my documents, had them sitting on the desk. If the girl comes in and she's like, well, you're operating without a license. Yes, I am. It's not my fault. I've done everything I can possibly do. If you'd like to have me arrested, call Sheriff McDuffie in Effingham County and have me arrested, and let's make this national news. That's my personality, right? Because that's really what needs to happen to make a change, it seems like. And frankly, I'm here today wondering what kind of retribution I might possibly receive it in the long run, but I could really care less because this is so embarrassing that we're here for this. I know your time is so important and what you need to be dealing with. And it should be as simple as somebody puts in for a renewal, they qualify. These are qualified people. They have no problems. What is the problem? Like, it's not rocket science. It's very simple. Like, and so I don't even understand all these hours of talking when it should just happen. And there's no reason it shouldn't just happen. There's an easy solution. Okay, so let me see if I can get back on track. Sorry. Because there's a few other things I want to be sure that I get said. So it's been 11 months. Made those points. Let me see if there's anything else. I think I've even asked all the questions. I don't, hopefully, you know, why did it work for all those years and now it doesn't work? Whatever got broke, if you could find the break, you can flip the switch and fix it.
So, Ms. Jones, I just want to say that I'm sorry, truly sorry for what you've been through. And I can say that because of what you've been through and many others across that state is why we're here.
I appreciate that.
And your representative and our lieutenant governor saw that, and that's definitely why we're here. You are one of many that we've heard from. In fact,
Thousands.
my personal, I just say the lady that does my hair.
Yeah.
She had a similar experience, not exactly, but she could not get renewed online.
Yeah.
And she was definitely afraid of, getting in trouble because she wasn't licensed. And she went to Macon to the office and spent about 3 hours there. And then they still could not print her license because they did not have ink for the printer.
Wow.
So, I mean, it was very frustrating. Let me say, and I'm not trying to, I don't know the word, but I believe that we know what the problem is, and it is that new system, a lot of it.
Has to be.
The gentleman that we heard from first, Todd, I truly believe he is getting his hands around it and has made a lot of difference in the licensing division. He's not there yet, and he's going to tell you he knows he's not there yet. The reason they chose to do, and this it had nothing to do with us, but they chose to do a few of the boards to try to get the kinks worked out. And obviously, I don't think a lot of the kinks got recognized until he got here.
Yeah.
And I want to say too, I think it's a time for me to say this. We invited, and Maggie, I do appreciate you being here. But I want to kind of apologize to you, and I want to apologize to members of this committee, and I want to apologize to the employees of the licensing division, because we asked a month and a half ago for our Secretary of State to be in attendance at this meeting and just give us an update of where he thinks the licensing division is and address anything. Well, he couldn't because he's busy with elections. But 2 days ago, he was probably in this very room. And it's obvious to me and probably to everybody sitting at this table that division has been neglected for probably close to 4 years because they did not have a director, a person in charge. And I think it's definitely a sign because he hasn't made the effort to be here and just acknowledge that we even exist. And it's very frustrating. I mean, I've known him for years, and I apologize because we've asked and we've tried to work with and everybody. You know, I think the previous Secretary of State, anytime there was a committee discussing anything in his office, I believe he was there. It's disappointing that he hasn't acknowledged, you know, it was my idea to invite him in the first place. And I wish he had come, you know, and it was appropriate for the speaker and the lieutenant governor to ask him to come. That's the way it works.
Well, he must be aware
But
of
so
the phone calls that are coming in that,
well, I hope. And we wouldn't have formed this committee unless we saw it as an issue. And yes, y'all are very important. Y'all are the backbone of our communities. And I realize that. And I think everybody up here does.
small business.
And I apologize. I'm sorry that you've gone through what you and that you've said, okay, I'm done, that is terrible. That is awful. I do think things are better. I'm sure that lady sitting right there is going to help you as soon as we finish this, and she's going to help you hopefully get it resolved, but you may not want to anymore. And I understand that too.
I would like for my license to be in place until the new girl gets her license in January. I don't like operating without a license. We try to do things legally. You know, we pay our fees, we pay our taxes. We're small business. We're the backbone of the state of Georgia. And if we ran our businesses the way the state is dealing with us, but we really have no, thank you. We really have no recourse other than having this type of opportunity right here. What can I possibly do?
I hope that we can help resolve this issue, and I do really appreciate you being here.
Well,
any other members want to say anything?
Two other little points I just want to make real quick is one is imagine, I don't know if you gentlemen are in types of businesses that require a license, but if you are, imagine that you couldn't obtain that license and you were operating without a license in fear of whatever that means. Not sure really. I did get a threat about I got a threat from her, that girl that day, that she would be filling out paperwork and sending it to the county and that they would be sending someone, but it would take so long that probably I would have my new license by then. But like I said, I can accept any of that. The last thing I did want to say is when you understand what you guys do representing us, the people, is so important. And this is affecting how all citizens look at the state of Georgia and our representation. And we can only pray to God the same office that's running this is also running our election. So we can only pray that that's being done better than this is. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person for public comment is Miss, let's see here, I think it's Malia Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. You have heard about my concerns with the Behavior Analyst Licensing Board before, so I will keep my comments brief. My name is Malia Davis, and I am speaking here to you today as a behavior analyst, a business owner, and most importantly, a mother to a beautiful child with autism. ABA therapy forever changed my son Jake's life. It inspired me to get my QBA credentials and become a behavior analyst. It also inspired me to open Alameda Behavioral Therapy in Richmond Hill, Georgia, where I employ behavior analysts and registered behavior technicians. We currently serve children and families touched by autism spectrum related disorders. My practice proudly serves countless military families near base because our ABA services are included in military insurance. As a behavior analyst, a business owner, and a mother of a child with autism, I am deeply invested in the future of the behavior analyst field in Georgia. There is already a shortage of behavior analysts in the state who can work with our children. We cannot let licensure become a barrier for our current and future practitioners. The Georgia Behavior Analyst Licensing Board currently includes only BACB credentialed practitioners. The board is supposed to issue licenses for both BACBAs and QBAs, two different credentialing organizations. The board has adopted specific BACB policies as it rules and will not communicate with the QABA to employ both BCBAs and QASPSs. So the licensing board preferences towards one credentialing organizations and their lack of communication is very concerning for my employees, my business, and the children that we serve. At one of the licensing board meetings earlier this year, I coordinated over 15 parents and practitioners to testify and voice their concerns about licensure and how the lack of the QABA representation of the board could lead to a biased response when issuing licenses. I had military families state that they might have to transfer from Fort Stewart if the QBAs and QAFs their children work with are not issued licenses because of how long ABA waitlists are in Georgia. I had practitioners talk about not wanting to lose their jobs because they decided to be credentialed with the QABA instead of the BCBA. Do you know what they responded to after we pleaded for answers for over an hour? Nothing. After being involved in this process for months, I have not received any word from this board about licensure for QABAs. I am so worried about the future of my business and practitioners in Georgia that I opened a second practice in North Carolina where BCBAs and QABA are both named into law to be on the licensing board and receive licenses. I am not involved in politics at all. I became a behavior analyst because I wanted to help my son, Jake, and other children who may need me. It is why we all become behavior analysts, to help children and individuals struggling with behavioral disorders. I can't wrap my head around how this licensing board can favor one credentialing organization when both BCBAs and QBAs help children across the state. The General Assembly can't let ABA treatment turn into a licensing turf war that negatively impacts access to care. The people who will be hurt the most are children like my son, Jake. I will submit recommendations for the study committee to review to ensure this problem does not negatively impact my employees, the children we serve, and families across Georgia. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Scott, with the Georgia Utility Contractor Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. My name is Scott Brumelo, Georgia Utility Contractors Association, Executive Director. And I would like to, of course, let you know, of course, that we, of course, have 500 members in our association. 300 are utility contractors, and our utility license is so valuable to us that with me today is our president and our past president and several board members here. And our utility license is due to expire April 30th of 2025. We cannot afford for it to be non-renewed. Millions of Georgians are depending on that for clean water, sewer, underground power, fiber and such. Those are vital issues. Now, we are encouraged that the licensing board has increased their availability to answer calls for those that are calling in. But if they cannot renew their license, for those that have existing license, then we are in jeopardy. But the current issue is those that are trying to get their license. Now, the members of the association that are with me today are going to bring up specific issues that they are currently facing. But these issues have been going on for far too long about applications that have been lost or delayed. But I do have encouraging news in the PowerPoint that we saw today from Maggie that said that hopefully the licensing board will be able to approve applications that are accurate and complete, that do not have to go to the division chair for approval. The PowerPoint was very encouraging. Let's hope that can happen, because applications that have to be sent in, processed, and have to wait for weeks and months for no apparent reason is just uncalled for. And is just, many people just give up. And that is something that is unfair to citizens that have devoted their lives to an industry that is, again, something that's going to benefit all of Georgia citizens. Additionally, I made this comment at our meeting in Macon. We have been faced with unlicensed utility construction work in the state of Georgia that we have to have more investigators for. Now, what that means is we're going to have to hire more investigators, which means budget increases. Because when a cease and desist issue is ordered and it takes months to get on the job site, that contractor who was doing the work illegally is long gone. The money's been collected and he's on to another job site. The licensing board, they do take action, but again, it's months later. That has to get quicker response. We send in the reports, we send in the photos. You know, we have contractor members who are just fiercely mad that they have to compete against unlicensed contractors because they are taking the work that does not belong to them. I encourage you to help us make changes. I do believe we can make changes, positive changes, if we work together. Again, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak to you. You know, it's going to be an uphill battle, but together we can make proper changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the rest of the committee for allowing me to speak this morning. I spoke with you all in Macon as well as with Scott. I'm here just to talk on behalf. I work for Integral Municipal Services, based out of Atlanta, but I'm also the president of the Georgia.
Do you mind getting just a little closer to that mic? Because some
Okay.
folks are watching you that have let us know they can't hear you.
Oh, then I need to make sure I smile then, right? I'm also the president of the Georgia Utility Contractors Association this current year. And along with what Scott said, I'm just here to talk about some of the licensing issues that we've seen that have been brought to us by our members. We've got two different licenses that we have, which I know you guys are familiar with, the utility foreman's license and the utility manager's license. With the utility foreman's license, our members are seeing that it's becoming a little bit overburdensome for them, being that no other state that we are aware of requires the foreman's license. And also for the requirement in the statute that on every job site, there's a requirement for someone of either a foreman or a manager to be on site with the crew. When we have our gas contractors, for instance, they run small 3-man crews, and they could be running up to 8, 9, 10 crews a day, depending on where they're working. We're seeing that as an issue for them, especially since some of the same requirements are with OSHA, and they already require a competent person on site, which we have to have our OSHA cards as stated by the law. The other issue we're seeing with the foreman's license is we used to be able to get third-party background checks, and now we're seeing that the law states that we have to physically have the individuals who are applying go to their particular police station where they reside in order to get this background check done. And before it was easier for the companies to manage that. to be able to get the background checks and help the people through the process as they wanted to move on up and obtain these licenses. Also, when they submit the background check information, if they're denied, we don't always get a clear explanation of what they were denied for. And so those reasonings, those particular infractions could be decades old, could be something that happened when they're 18 and now they're 45. We're just unsure. We would like a little clarity on that, at least in a response back, in terms of knowing what disqualifies somebody from being able to do the work that we do. And so it can be addressed even in the hiring process as we bring people on. Lastly, for the foreman's license, part of the applicant must have all their company experience from their current employer and previous employers on a notarized company letterhead, which can prove to be very difficult to get, being that these companies could either have gone out of business, it could have been decades ago where they worked at those particular companies. That has proved to be a real challenge for us. As far as the utility manager's license, we've got some of the same issues with the background check and the notarized letter from previous employees. But we know that if you're in state, you're required to have the foreman's license for 2 years. That's not the case if you're an out-of-state individual applying. You just have to show your work experience. We know that we already have to have 3 letters of reference that attest to the experience. In addition to the notarized employee letters, we would just like to see something changed that makes it equivalent for those Georgians that are in state, as well as we know people are coming from out of state to try to work, but we would love for that to be kind of equal footing for us. The other question we have is in terms of permanent locations. We know that the statute requires that we must have a manager on site at every permanent location. Just some clarity to provide what constitutes a permanent location. Many of our members do work and projects all over the state while based in one particular county or city or town. And that job could last anywhere from 3 weeks to 18 months or longer. And we're just curious on what would specify that in those terms. And lastly, we know that in terms of the contractor's license, the statute is asking for us to have our registration number displayed prominently on in the yellow pages, newspapers, and what we're seeing is in other methods. But what we're worried about in terms of that prominent display is people using our numbers and going out and doing work under false pretenses, using our numbers. And we have another member who will speak more to that, but people can easily access our UC numbers and be able to apply for different jobs. And if those individuals aren't doing their correct background checks, you know, they're getting the jobs, and then we're getting notifications as a utility contractor saying, you've been approved for permits or things of that nature. Again, those are just the issues that we are seeing that have popped up in terms of the statute and the law. I'm going to turn it over, and I thank you for the time today to speak with you guys and address some of these things.
Thank you, Jason. Kenya, are you with? Okay. Is he who you're referencing? You fall next, so it just kind of falls in line. He's talking about Mr. Bobby. He looks familiar, that Bobby fella.
Good afternoon. I appreciate you giving us the time to speak on behalf of the utility industry. My name is Kenya Simmons. I am a 35-year owner of T&J Industries Development and Contractor, which is a water pipeline utility construction company. And I have the same sentiments that the president, Jason, also stated. And that is that if we're lucky enough to get someone on the phone, when we call to try to be proactive, we try to apply in enough time so that if there is an issue, it can be addressed. We have one employee in particular I spoke in Macon about, and he applied back around the 1st of August. And we're still waiting. We have called, we've inquired, and I don't know if his application is lost or not because we can't get any answers. Meantime, this is his livelihood. And that's just not fair and it's not acceptable. We have, on a personal note, I employ 2 of my sons work within my company and they are having the same issues to the point one of my sons just gave up and said, I'm not even gonna worry about getting my foreman license. He had it before, but when he went to renew it, all of a sudden things changed and the same credentials that they accepted before, now there's a problem, but when you call to try to get clarity on that problem, there's no response or no answer, or nobody knows what's going on. And again, we're dealing with people's livelihoods, and that simply just isn't fair. These are good tax-paying citizens. Most have been in this industry for better than 15, 20 plus years. And this is what they do, and it's all they know. So finding another industry may not be an option for them at this point. So we would like to see some improvements in the areas of communication. And I don't know if it's an option, but this new system doesn't seem to be working properly. So either if we can fix it, great. If not, we may have to just consider it a loss, move back to the old system, because we didn't have any problems with that system previously.
Thank you. Thank you for testifying, Ms. Kenya. Jody with Y Delta.
Good morning. Thank you for y'all's time and everything. I'm a utility contractor, but I'm a little different. I do general contracting, mechanical, plumbing. I have multiple licenses, but I have a gentleman that works for me that he got sick, was out, missed his renewal, and then we can't bid state work because we can't get a state agency to renew his license. We sent everything in, you get your license back. I mean, not your license back. When you do your classes for your stuff, then they send something back, says, well, you missed this month, because that continuing education was not recognized. So then you have to go to the next month to wait for them to review it. Well, then you try to turn in work for the state and they say your license is not valid right now. So what can we do right now to actually get back to work with that? You know, because I don't know what, we're kind of at a loss what to do about it.
You know, do you think, or do you know if that issue is actually with the licensing board, or is it with the committee, the actual, I guess, is it with the inside office that you're not hearing back from, or is it with the board? The board is saying they have to make that decision.
It's with the people that you talk to about, you know, that I guess they present it to the board to do it, where you turn your stuff into.
Okay. And you're like, had
and
to
we're like,
appeal or something like that.
yes, or and we're just can't get back. And it's just, we do work right here at Georgia Southern. And, you know, if we don't have that license, I can't bid work. And a lot of times we're the only bidder on some jobs. And then all of a sudden we can't qualify. We're just really fighting it. And we're seeing people come in, you know, with our utility work that are actually, they're farming their manager license out, is what I call it. If you'll look, the utility manager license you have to take and apply for utility contractor's license. So that's another license you have to have. Well, these guys are not even working for the companies. They're just using it when they're supposed to be a full-time employee. You know, if they don't have a W-2 for that company, that license shouldn't be able to be used for that company. And we're seeing that happen left and right. I mean, we've seen people bid jobs, and we look and you pull the guy's name up, you go stalk his Facebook, and you see him on a machine with a different company name, but then his license standing good for another utility contractor. You know, how does that work? You know, we get OSHA stops by our job sites and looks at us. but we've never, with the state, does anybody go around and check license? Just pop in, like go stop by a job site and see, is that company, is that fall on local or is that state level that needs to be looked at that?
A good question. And you're a lot more composed and pleasant than I probably would be.
Well,
Any questions?
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bobby Toohey. Rube Collins.
First, I want to thank you, Chairman Hatchett, Chairman Tillery, and committee members for sitting on this committee and the work that you're doing with it. Also, I know the speaker stepped out, but I want to thank the speaker as well as Lieutenant Governor for identifying that there is a problem with licensing in the state of Georgia. And to me, this is the way things get fixed. In small committees, this is where you have to start. So I want to thank you for your time today. Just to give you a little bit of my background, I'm division director at Ruby Collins General Contractors, and I'm a past president of GUCA, Georgia Utility Contractors Association. This year I serve as ex officio for the GUCA Association. I've carried a utility manager's license as well as a contractor's license since the year 2000. And I will tell you, whenever I applied for my license, I didn't have a problem. So I don't know if it was so long ago that it was easy to get and it was just getting started, but it was easier to obtain then. But over the years in my career, I have heard many stories that you've heard over the past 4 meetings that you've had across this state, and they're real. They're real problems. They're real problems that need to be fixed, and I believe this is a big step toward getting those problems fixed. Last year, whenever I found out this board was or this committee was going to be started, I presented it to the GUCA association members and talked to them about it and told them what was going to happen. And the biggest question I got back was, will it make a difference? And I think that's what needs to happen. And my answer to them was an absolute yes, because I have enough confidence in the people on this board, the committee work itself, that I do believe it'll make a difference. And I do think that what we saw today from the Secretary of State's office is evidence of that. And we are moving in the right direction. And then we had the other presentations from the others. So yes, and Jason, you can go back and tell the membership that it is making a difference at this point. And I think we'll get through the finish line. But I just wanted to take this opportunity just to tell you, I know you're all busy. We're all busy. We're working our own businesses. But I thank you for the time and the effort that you've done over the past few months with this committee. And just thank you very much, and thank you for the time.
Thank you. Virginia Hannah.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to the Blue Ribbon Committee, and I'd like to thank y'all for your work. I am deemed qualified by this great state of Georgia as a state licensed hearing aid specialist. I have passed competency exams, and I run a hearing aid clinic to where I am licensed by the state to fit prescription hearing aids. I represent myself and myself only in my thoughts and concerns today. I come today with 2 concerns regarding this profession. My hopes is that the possible discussion of delicensing by the state for hearing aid specialists. My hopes that the others that have come before me have debunked this and have put that to rest. The thought of taking away the license for individuals that dispense prescription hearing aids, when you think about that, number one, please understand that the manufacturers that provide prescription hearing aids only provide those prescription hearing aids to people with a state license. The second thought along that line is that more and more insurance companies are helping to cover the cost of hearing aids. And they, for the most part, will also only cover those costs for prescription hearing aids only that is dispensed by a state licensed professional. The passing of the FDA's OTC products, the sale of the over-the-counter products for hearing devices. It was also intended with that to reclassify prescription devices to only be dispensed by state licensed professionals. So when you look at the big picture of that, if you are still kind of tossing around the idea of removing the state license from individuals in the hearing healthcare industry, you definitely are putting Georgians at risk of reducing access to care and also putting a burden on Georgians to be possibly in front of people who are not qualified and credentialed to perform the tasks that we do every day in the clinic. The best way to describe what the daily clinic of someone running a hearing aid specialist office does, we are state licensed to make medical red flags. Recognize medical red flags. And we work closely with local ear, nose, and throat doctors. It is with our license and our credentials that they absolutely take our referrals when we do see medical red flags in the clinic. We, for instance, saw some COVID-related sudden single-sided hearing loss that, as a hearing care professional who is licensed and trained by the state, we know there is a very short time window to get that patient in to see an ENT to try to reverse some of the effects of that hearing loss. We also are involved every day in performing invasive procedures. So we, with our state license, have been deemed qualified and licensed by the state to perform things such as making ear impressions, ear molds, as well as wax removal, and invasive procedures. What I mean by that is that if you're not qualified or state licensed to do so, you can injure someone, you can injure a patient. So the complication of prescription hearing aid devices definitely is very involved. And I would hope that we are well past the consideration of delicensing us as the fact that, the importance of what we do in the hearing healthcare industry and how we care for patients, that is absolutely protecting our Georgians to make sure they are sitting in front of an individual that is credentialed and state licensed to do what they do on a daily basis. My second concern for the profession that I've heard from others is the application process in general needs to be expedited. The ways that we can expedite that process is in the area of taking the practical exam. We need additional locations for the practical portion of the exam. We need more slots for the practical portion, as only 4 slots are provided. And also we need to have more frequent testing opportunities, as that is only provided 1 Saturday a month. In closing, we need to continue to be proud of our hearing health care services in the state of Georgia by not decreasing access to care for our Georgians who suffer from hearing loss. The two ways that we can do that is to ensure that our state license credentials remain intact, to ensure access, that we have access to prescription hearing aids, and to also ensure that Georgians are protected and served by state licensed hearing care professionals. The other way that we can help with making sure that our Georgians who suffer from hearing loss are taken care of is also to expedite the application process by adding more capacity for taking the portions of the exam. Our Georgia state licensed hearing instrument specialists for this state deserve your attention. Our Georgia citizens who suffer from hearing loss deserve this attention as well. Again, I thank you and I look forward to watching the changes that y'all can make to improve hearing health care in the state of Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yes, sir.
So do you, and I do not know this at all, so that's why I'm asking. Where do you get your patients from? Are they referred to you by ENTs? And I don't know if you're an audiologist or what.
So I'm a state licensed hearing instrument specialist.
Okay. Where do you get your patients?
So my patients come from, yes, sir, ENT referrals.
Referrals,
I
okay.
have currently 8 different doctors referring me patients.
So
My-
if like my wife right now is telling me I need a hearing aid, okay, and I haven't seen anybody about that. If I wanted to just walk in your office, is that possible?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
And then
sir.
do you do testing?
Yes, sir. Under my state license, I am qualified to test your hearing, rule out medical red flags, determine candidacy for prescription hearing aids. Also to do the fitting process. So from the start of a hearing test to the end of that fitting with that patient, an hour and a half is that process on instruction, on proper insertion. You know, for instance, with this over-the-counter FDA, we have seen some concerns. We have patients that walk into our clinics with domes in their ears, where the product that they bought off the shelf and called a 1-800 number when they had problems, domes in ear canals. We have patients that suffer from sudden hearing loss that run out to Revco. I'm sorry. Wow, that dated my, that run out to Walgreens to purchase something that's over the counter because they've lost sudden hearing. Whereas here again, if that patient had walked into my office and I have that happen, that's an immediate referral to an ear and nose and throat specialist because there is a very small window to try to get that sudden hearing loss reversed by medical intervention. So that
How long have the over-the-counter product been out?
I believe the FDA approved that in 2022, and those over-the-counter products are appropriate for mild, in my opinion, gently sloping moderate hearing loss. They are, for the most part, one size fits most and one sound fits most. So for instance, in your example, if your wife did talk you into going to Walgreens and purchasing an over-the-counter product, please understand that that product is not programmed for your hearing loss at each frequency, and it's certainly not medically fit for your ears. So by coming to a state licensed hearing care professional, we are credentialed to test, determine candidacy for hearing aids, rule out medical red flags, and then go forward with your hearing aid fitting that is, you know, specifically programmed based on where you fall at frequencies, as well as follow-up care. I see my patients every 3 months for care.
Thank you. Go ahead.
You want to go ahead, Prince? You go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
And thank you for your presentation. But Chairman Hatchett, I think your wife is right. Every time I come to ask you for money, you seem like you can't hear me. But going back, so I mean, based on your testimony, your concern is making sure that this board remains intact, that as far as getting licensings and things like that, renewing, you're pretty good on that.
Yes, sir. That was the second part of my presentation. Not me personally, to be honest with you. I have a clinic inside of a big box office retail store. So I am a state licensed hearing instrument specialist that is state licensed to sell prescription hearing devices. So I don't have anyone working under me that's trying to go through the application process. However, I have spoken to several people in the last couple of days, and it seems to be that the practical portion of the exam is the issue there. There are only 4 slots allowed, one time of month, for individuals trying to pass the practical. So the slots are very limited. The location.
Are they first come, first serve? Or
You know,
is that-
that is not a question that I can answer, but I will tell you that the fail rate is pretty high. So only allowing 4 slots one time a month in one location in the state of Georgia is the issue. So we need to expand capacity for the practical portion of that exam.
Thank you, Ms. Hannah, for being here. I have just a couple of questions. My understanding, and we're learning some of this too, is there are licenses under the license, right? So there's a dispenser license, but if you're a dispenser, you can't dispense unless you also are only dispensing underneath a dealer who also has a license. Is that?
That's correct. Yes.
Where do you fall on that spectrum? Do you have a dealer's license?
Well, I actually work in a big box office. I'm sorry, a big box. I work for Sam's Club.
Okay.
So under the Sam's Club,
So Sam's
for
has a
instance, they have a
dispenser
dealer
dealer.
license.
Then you have
Okay.
a dispenser.
And then I'm a dispenser under that dealer license location.
And then there's a license underneath you that allows, like, if you have assistants, et cetera, don't they have to be licensed under even a separate license?
There is
from
an
that?
apprenticeship license, and to be honest with you, I've never had an apprentice, so I don't know. I cannot speak to that, but yes, there is an apprentice license as well.
Just trying to get a understanding of, seems like a lot of licenses. But I don't know that I have a question off of that, but just from I think it's something that we're seeing in many different fields, not just your industry, is when you've got a license for one thing, I understand the protection of health at that level.
Absolutely.
Then it seems as the more you go down, at what point in time do we get away from a protection of health and then a protection of, well, I'm not even going to say that, but I think everyone else understands. At what point in time are you simply just protecting turf? And I'm not assessing saying that you're doing that.
I
Just don't hear that.
completely understand that. In the world of hearing aid sales, there's a lot of that goes on. I will tell you, to ensure the safety of Georgia citizens, to make sure that they are receiving the proper health care and the fall in line in a clinic setting, I do believe that apprenticeship license is important. And so then you go upwards from the apprenticeship to obtaining your state license. And then of course your dealer's license is just your ability to, be a dealer. But as far as looking at the apprenticeship licensure, do I think it's important? Yes, I do.
Can I ask you this question? You interact with patients on a daily basis.
Yes.
Who is your dealer? Sam's Club?
So I work for the company that puts hearing centers inside Sam's Club. Yes, sir.
Do they deal with patients on a daily basis?
No, sir. So I work for the company that basically, over
Right.
about 500 locations, we as a state licensed individual are sitting in hearing centers inside Sam's Club
Right.
that work for the company, but no. So, so we are the state licensed person there.
Right. They're at least one step removed from actual physical contact.
Physical contact with
Invasive procedure
patients.
contact,
Mhm.
the things that you mentioned. Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. I think we've reached the end of the sign-up sheet. There may be people in the audience who didn't see the sign-up sheet, didn't have time to sign in. Obviously, you sat through this meeting. you are interested in this topic, and we certainly want to give you the option to speak if you need or wanted to do so. Okay, Mr. Chairman. We specifically at this time reserve time for members who are sitting up here. If you have any comments you want to make, knowing that this is likely our last meeting, if you wish to give any direction as Chairman Hatchett and I start to now try to tailor down what we've heard over the past 4 meetings in 5 months to recommendations later on, I want to make sure each of you who've taken some from your time away from your family and friends and work have an opportunity to say anything or add anything or give us any direction. Chairman Prince.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank both of you for the opportunity to serve and work with you guys, everybody on the committee. And I appreciate us, especially Secretary of State's office, working with us to try to make things better for Georgia. Just ask that we continue looking at some of the legislative proposals from the Secretary of State's office, but also see if what we can do to just make sure that all Georgians have an opportunity, and we can make this as seamless as possible, getting the license. Most folks have done the work. They've been to schools, they've been to the trades, they've done all that work. And for us to hold them up or be a part of holding them up is just not a good thing. So I look forward to the comments that we make and the recommendations. So again, thanks for this opportunity.
I'd just like to thank the speaker and the governor and everybody on the committee for putting the time and effort into this, because it is, I think every one of us have multiple people in our districts that have many issues with this, and it's super frustrating, and it's almost an issue that shouldn't even be dealt with at this point. But so I just thank everybody for doing it, and I know for a fact that we'll have a lot of resolution to it, and hopefully it'll come to a speedy resolve. Thank you.
Thank you to both chairmen for having these informative meetings, and I appreciate everybody's time. I thank the Lieutenant Governor and Speaker for appointing this committee, and I appreciate the Lieutenant Governor for putting me on here. I've spent a good bit of time working on these type issues, and I guess giving it a lot of thought. The Institute of Justice, as I mentioned earlier, if number one's the best, Georgia's number 38 on if you are gauging the burden of licensure, and in the work when we're talking about workforce shortages, and we're talking about tremendous investment in our technical colleges and universities, and trying to develop a strong workforce in Georgia and continue to be the number one state to do business. And then you get into the licensure issue and you realize what a barrier that is to a lot of people being able to be successful or being starting a small business or gaining meaningful employment where they can provide for their family with a good wage. I think it's contrary to what we want from what the legislature wants for Georgians. I listened to a podcast on the way down here this morning from Justice Neil Gorsuch, and the subject of the podcast was the tremendous expansion of government and government laws and regulations and all of that. And he talked about occupational licensing in the podcast, and he used cosmetology as an example, and he had a specific situation with a person that prevented them from enjoying their life and liberty and pursuit of happiness in the United States. So it was timely that I listened to that. And I think we have the more I've thought about this, I think structurally our system is set up to fail, really. You have boards that are appointed by the governor that are not accountable to the public. They're not accountable to the legislature. The Senate does have to, what do you call it? Confirm the appointment, but you know how that works. I mean, it's a long list of appointments and we blanket confirm them. So there's no real accountability to the legislature. I don't think they could be removed by the legislature, unless maybe they violated the law or something. So you got that weird dynamic. Then you have the Secretary of State who's providing administrative support for these boards, but he didn't appoint them and they're not really accountable to the Secretary of State. So what we've heard in these 4 meetings is a lot of finger pointing. It seems to me saying, well, I can't do this because of them, and well, I can't do anything about that because I don't appoint them, or I can't do anything about it. So a lot of finger pointing. And then, so structurally, it's awkward to begin with. And then we have, in my opinion, way too many licenses. We have 41 or 2 licenses under the professional licensing board. And then there are other licenses scattered out through our code. So that's, in my opinion, too many. We have then a new system. So we've got a process issue that's exacerbated the already broken system. And so it's a tough nut to crack. Some of the things that Maggie has talked to us about make a lot of sense to me, and I think we ought to take a hard look at her recommendations and maybe consider some legislation coming out of that. One of them is to allow administrative approval of licenses if all the requirements are met. Let the professional licensing board approve the license and issue it. That ought to speed the process up. Remove licensing requirements from outdated and overly burdensome, and outdated. And I'll point again to the Georgia Supreme Court case of Jackson versus Raffensperger, where the Georgia Supreme Court said that the regulation of lawful business is limited to some reasonable necessity for the protection of the public health, safety, morality, or other phase of the general welfare. If it doesn't meet those standards, then it's unconstitutional according to the Georgia Supreme Court. So I think we ought to look at some of the licenses on the books and see if it meets those standards. And if it doesn't, I think we ought to sunset them. So I think if we're for efficient, and if we're wanting to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars, and we want an efficient, responsive, limited government, which is what I want, I think we ought to look at sunsetting some of these things. The idea of requiring all the boards to utilize an electronic continuing ed tracker, that bill was introduced, House Bill 1096. It didn't make it over the finish line, but I think we ought to pass that. And then the talk about, instead of requiring transcripts, just getting a list of who graduated. I mean, I don't think we really care what their grades were. We just want to know, did they get a degree or not? Maybe that would speed things up. But there's a lot of work that can be done. We also heard testimony from a lot of different industries that there is a strong pushback when you start talking about eliminating the license requirement for their industry. And each one of them will come and tell you, well, ours, we don't mind if you eliminate some of these others, but ours is important. And a lot of it is protectionism, really, I think, is what's driving some of it. But anyway, I'm happy I look forward to the recommendations of this committee, and I hope we can make some changes that will make it better for Georgia citizens.
Let me go first, Chairman Hatchett. Well, again, thank you members for being here. Thank you again to Georgia Southern. Maggie, thank you for being here. The House members who helped put on the technology, Justin, David, whose staff is Brian. Thank y'all a ton. Walk back to these 4 hearings and remember where you started. At first, we had the first conversations were a lot about testing and whether the testings were applicable to the end all license. We don't need to forget that now that we've moved on down the road a little bit. Don't forget that. Remember, we had issues with singular testing companies and the inability to at times control that fee and how much that fee cost Georgians who were applying. Very early on in this process, we also had an issue that understand for administrative purposes where the agency moved to terminate license applications within a certain period of time, usually 60 days, if the application wasn't complete. Honestly, thanks to the work of Maggie and to Todd, that has changed dramatically. One, taking that rule off. We didn't need it in a time when you were moving potentially to a new system. At the same time, Maggie personally working on so many of the problems. Just because we're working on the problems, that doesn't mean there weren't problems. And we can't simply say thank you and then walk away, say, well, we're better than we were if we're still doing badly. The changes being made, I do think, are substantial. Again, though, the 17% folks who just give up and the at times 90-minute wait times that have been reduced again to half an hour still are not at all acceptable by the folks here in our state. We've heard a lot of talk about protection. And you heard, I think Chairman Walker said it best when it's protection of the public. That's one thing. But when it becomes protection of an industry, we've got to be very careful. And everything we're brought in the session each year, remember, everyone has a reason to bring a bill and to bring an agency or to bring a license. And if we do take looks at those licenses that are currently in place and those go away for your industry or scaled back for your industry, don't fret and lose hope all that day. If there are public health reasons for putting it back, expect you'll see it come back. But while government is really good at beginning things, creating things, we are horribly inefficient at ever ending them. And some of the things that we possibly started more than a century ago probably now don't need to exist any longer. Chairman Walker, I think, also mentioned something about finger pointing. We heard a lot about barriers to entry. That's kind of like $100 word to say it's hard to do something, right? When you're one of these people applying for the license, barriers to entry means absolutely nothing to you. It's not a phrase you'd ever use. The phrase you'd probably use would be despair. You're trying to figure out how you make a mortgage, make ends meet, and sometimes pay other people who you've already employed. I hope the recommendations you see out of this organization, while they may at first shock you or make you take a step back, that you realize that this might be a multi-year process where we take and scale things back. There's never going to be an opportunity to, it's harder to stop something than it is to start something. So if we start and scale back too much, I think that's a better position to be in for this committee than to not scale back enough from the beginning. It's going to be very hard to take some of the theoretical things that are mentioned and turn them into the practical and tangible solutions. But I do appreciate what Maggie brought us, some of those, and think those are a really good start. And hope you'll see some of those as we roll out in the next few months.
Thank you, Chairman Tillery, Chairman Walker, Chairman Prince, our local representative, Lehman Franklin. I can't stress enough the importance of what we've done and what the licensing division does and has done. Maggie, you have been a trooper. You've been at every meeting. You've taken heat. You've helped people. Thank you. Todd Zandrowitz, I think I said his name right, the new director of the licensing division. Thank you for the work you've put in I know you're still putting your arms around it, but I have full confidence in you and your staff, everybody in that division, that things will continue to improve. We're not there yet, but I think things are getting better. And as Chairman Tillery said, there's a lot of things for us to consider. We will be doing that, and we will be presenting things, some changes. I hope that people will see those as improvements. And I look forward to working with everyone sitting at this table and the others that are on the committee that could not make it to do that. I think it's been productive. I hope the citizens feel that they have been heard, but we're still listening. And if there continue to be the same issues and more issues, we're not, at least, I think most everybody up here, we're not going away. We'll still be here. And thank you. And with that, I think, oh, one other thing, all the PowerPoints that have been shown today, they will be available online when all this is up. So thank you. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Brian. Thank y'all every time for being here. David, I won't say it's been fun, but it's been real fun. So thank you for the work you've done and put into this committee. And now I guess some of the real work begins between now and session. So thank you all for being here. With that, we're adjourned.